What is going on, everyone? This is Miles Dompier, and welcome to the 100th episode of Xbox Chaturdays. Today, I am stoked to be joined by the show's original co-host. If you've been following the Chaturdays lore, you know once upon a time, Jez Corden and I would get on stream and ramble while playing video games as the early startup of Xbox Chaturdays. So I'm stoked to have you on for the big episode 100. Jez, how you doing on this fine Saturday, my man?
Hey man, it's good to be back. I'm doing pretty well. It's been a week. It's been a whole last week. Craziness.
Hell yeah.
And I did not expect that whole ABK news we got yesterday out the blue to, cap it off. But hey, looks like there's light at the end of the tunnel in the old Xbox world, and it's awesome to see Chaturdays, go from strength to strength and all the cool people we've had on it. And it's awesome to be back here for the 100th episode. Congrats, man.
Yeah, man, got it. Coming full circle with you on the big 100. And, a special shout out to you as someone who's always believed in the show and always believed in what I could do. And your support over the years has meant a lot. And it's been, awesome to work together in any capacity that we've had the opportunity to over the last few years. So appreciate you, man. Always love talking games with you. Always love your perspective. And I've talked about this before, but before I was, quote, in the industry, if you will, I remember listening to you and Rand on Xbox 2, just on my commute to work in the morning. So just being like an observer on the outside of the games industry, just, engaging in the conversations, even when I wasn't, working in the space. So it's awesome to have you be part of the show and have you back on for episode 100. So shout out to you, man. Really appreciate everything you've done over the last, God, it's been a couple of years. That's the craziest part, is it's 100 episodes means we've been going for a couple of years, which is still kind of mind-blowing when I think about it.
That is crazy. That is crazy.
It does not seem like that long.
Yeah. It doesn't.
So, like you said, it's been one hell of a week. There's a lot of stuff to dive into. So we're going to be talking about Resident Evil 4. We're going to be talking about Diablo 4. We're going to be talking about the massive developments surrounding ABK. And like you said, maybe some light at the end of this tunnel we've been enduring. We're going to be talking about the current state of Xbox, really dissecting how Xbox looks right now and what their future looks like. We're going to be talking about the Unreal demo, the showcasing some Hellblade 2. We're going to be talking about Redfall skipping PlayStation 5. We're going to be choosing the new official mascots for Xbox and so much more. But real quick, for the folks who maybe don't know, and I'm sure everyone here already does, let people know where they can find you and who you are.
Well, I'm Jez Corden, managing editor at windowscentral.com. You can find me on Twitter at Jez Corden, at least while Twitter still exists.
Ow.
And yeah, otherwise I'm on the Xbox 2 podcast, which you can search just by hammering that into Google. And yeah, rock and roll, baby.
Rock and roll. So before we get into the show proper, just want to give a huge shout out to you, all the folks tuning in, watching. It's been an awesome show. I've loved doing this every Saturday. It's one of the highlights of my week every single week. And I'm really grateful for all the amazing people who tune in, join in the conversation, and keep the chat fun and civil. It's one of the things I'm proudest of the show is that, I can look over at the chat and it's not a dumpster fire week over week. It's constructive conversations. And even though folks disagree, you're in there, being respectful, being kind, and that's awesome. That means a lot. So I really appreciate everyone who kind of tunes in for that perspective. If you haven't joined already, Xbox Chaturdays has a Discord now. So I've been trying to get into that space. There is a link in the description if you're interested. We're doing a community Q&A at the end of each episode. We're also going to be coordinating some fun stuff like movie nights as well over on the Discord. So if you want to be a part of that, jump in, join the rad people there. I got to give a quick shout out to our members, the amazing people who have thrown down some ducats to really support this channel and my transition to this little solo endeavor that I'm doing over here. So for the supporter tier, we got Sinful Sadie TTV, Rachel, Orange Rhino, Jigga J, Crytopsy, James, Shine Films, Derek Griffin Jones, V Simcoe, Cinedex, Anthony, Assassin, and last, but certainly not least, Julie Dompier, or my mom. So special shout out to my mom for supporting my channel.
Oh wow, that's more support than I get.
In the loyalist here, we got Nick W, we got Patrick, we got John Grasula, and a huge shout out to our producers, Hargeet Chani and Mr. Joanna Dark. So we just hosted our first members-only Q&A on the channel yesterday, or the day before, Thursday, and that was a lot of fun as well. So if you're interested, I'm trying to lean into that and trying to, give some cool stuff to the people who have supported this channel in that way. Now, Jez, in celebration of episode 100, I got a little something here. I got a little bubbly that I'm going to pop here. So I'm going to be getting after it for the big episode 100. So if you got a tea, if you got a glass of water, any of you folks watching live, if you got something to cheers, let's cheers to 100 episodes of Xbox Chaturdays and all the amazing people who make this such a damn cool thing to do. I'll try to get the satisfying pop sound for you without blasting myself in the face.
Here it comes.
Oh, baby, let's go.
If there was a pop, I think your mic very, very cleverly filtered it out.
Oh, we didn't get the satisfying pop.
Pop filter, man.
Where's that bubbly ASMR, dude? Okay.
Oh,
literal pop filter.
I've got I'll toast you with my Powerade Sports.
All right. So cheers, everyone. Appreciate all of you. Okay, Jez, let's get into it. First thing I want to talk about is something I know you're passionate about, and that is Diablo 4, baby. You and I both have been pretty amped up, pretty excited about Diablo 4. We've been looking forward to getting our hands on it. I remember a while back, I had somebody reach out and show me some juicy Diablo gameplay back when they were doing some insider beta testing for Diablo, and I was like, oh damn, this is looking good. This is looking dark. It's looking gritty. It's looking like the evolution of Diablo 2 I've been wanting all these years, and now we've had 2 weekends to get our hands on it. To go hands-on. First weekend I played it, I was excited. I did the sorcerer, but I gotta be honest, I was a little disappointed because Druid and Necromancer were always going to be the 2 classes that I was going to pick first. And I didn't get to play those in the first weekend, but I spent some time this weekend going hands-on with the Druid. And I'm excited, Jez, but I really want to hear how you feel. Because one of my favorite things in the world is sitting down and listening to the reasons that someone is excited for a video game. And I know you're excited about Diablo 4, so hit me with it.
Man, I played it hardcore last week, right? Absolutely hardcore, to the point where it gave me like eye injuries.
I saw you posting like, anyone else suffering eye strain? I'm like, no, Jez, you just played too much. You just played too much Diablo.
Man, I honestly don't know. Like, I never had a pain like that before. Like, it's sort of like a pressure behind my eyes and stuff. And I was like, what is this? This is crazy. And it was going on for like a couple of days. And then like I put my glasses on. And my girlfriend made me go outside because my girlfriend was like, "It's eye strain." I was like, "No, it can't be eye strain," And I went outside and looked away from the screens for a bit, and I was like, "Oh God, maybe it was eye strain." I don't know. And
but, I like that you tried to blame the game. Like, what is Diablo the problem, or am I the problem?
Well, the reason for that is some other people on Reddit were complaining about it because the game's like really zoomed in, and there's like really high res textures, so like a lot of detail, but it's microscopic. So like your eyes try and very harshly look into what you're looking at, and also because there's no overlay map like there is in Diablo 3 and Diablo 2, so you constantly look into the corner of the screen and then back to the middle of the screen and stuff like that. So I was wondering, maybe there is something to that. I don't know. For people who are like maybe older eyes that are falling apart like me, I don't know. But,
I do think there's something there, because with Diablo 3, a lot of people criticized the art style because it was more cartoony. It had a lot more contrast. But I think in that style of game, it actually lended itself beautifully because it worked well. You could tell what things were immediately, and there was the dynamic between your character, between enemies, between spells. And because Diablo has gone back to the more grounded, gritty, realistic roots, like you said, there's a ton of detail packed into us in this display. And if you really want to absorb the detail, those eyes gotta work, man.
Yeah, maybe. And yeah, they did me in. So this week, I went hardcore on Diablo 4 last week, and this week I kind of like I'm not gonna go so hardcore on it this week because I've already like done everything. I've done every dungeon repeatedly on my sorcerer and stuff. But I did go in this weekend and have a look at the necromancer a little bit because I am a necromancer main,
Hell
and I'll be
yeah.
playing
Respect to the
necromancer
goth
in
kids
Diablo
out there.
2. Goth kids, yeah. Necromancer in the Diablo 2, Diablo 3, and now Diablo 4. And man, it is really, really impressive. Like all the visual effects, the blood effects, corpse explosion is just so damn satisfying, man. I don't know if you've tried corpse explosion in the new one, but the sound engineers clearly had a lot of fun. Yeah, like I really want to know how they did the sound effects for some of the necromancer stuff because it's like squelchy and fleshy and
Yes,
stuff. It's like,
yes.
how did they make these sound effects? Like, I'd really love to see like a little mini doc about how
I
they
hope they
did
just
that.
had a bucket of meat and they're just getting their hands on it and squeezing
Yeah,
it.
it's the sound is just incredible. But like Binyubik in chat says, Necromancer is so OP. It is crazy overpowered right now, and like I think sometimes things scale strangely in these kind of games. Like things like might be overpowered at low level because you've got lots of minions or whatever. But maybe those minions don't scale with gear as much as some of the other classes. So by
Mhm.
end game, maybe Necromancer's more balanced. But I also think like, it's also a beta and this is the kind of thing they are testing for, I think. I think it's important not to remember that end game balance will be different even with this setup. But you know, the sort of that initial sort of wave of Diablo hype has washed over me now, and now I'm more in like feedback mode. What are some of the things that I want to see improved? Like, the rubber banding when you transition between areas, for example, is pretty
Mhm.
irritating. Um, I don't. The skeletons look cartoony. They need to change the design on the
So let
skeleton.
me is that
Stuff like that.
intentional? It seems like maybe they're trying to do like the stop animation, like classic vintage horror film where the skeletons are kind of like purposely choppy. Or is that just a frame rate issue? I can't tell if
That's
that's a
lag.
stylistic choice or if that's just a frame
Nah,
rate issue with only because it only happens with the skeletons. It only happens with the skeletons.
yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a bug, and I think it's something to do with. Because I've noticed it happens sometimes and then doesn't in other times. And I think like they're saving performance sometimes by reducing the frame rate on the skeletons, I think maybe. But I don't think it's meant to be doing that. Because sometimes it doesn't and sometimes it doesn't do it. I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of bugs with the skeletons. Like they get stuck in these desync states as well, which they need to sort out. And there's a lot of things that I would look to change about it or look to hope that they examine in terms of feedback. But this is the thing, it's an MMO, so they are going to be changing this stuff. And the
Mhm.
Diablo 4 is not going to be like Diablo 3. Well, in a way, it kind of is going to be like Diablo 3 because Diablo 3 today is a very different game to what it was at launch. At launch, you had the real money auction house. It
Yep.
didn't have it didn't have transmog as a baseline feature. They added that later. Like a lot of the features that are in Diablo 3 now were not there at launch because they developed it over the last 10 years or whatever. And Diablo 4 is going to be exactly the same way, but even more so because it is going to have a battle passes. It's going to have more monetized seasons, whereas Diablo 3 didn't. Diablo 3 had seasons, but they were kind of soft seasons, and they didn't really have much in the way of monetization. It was all free content.
Yeah, it was just your
But the,
typical ladder stuff. You work to
yeah,
rank yourself at the end of the
yeah, yeah,
season.
yeah, yeah. And there might be like a special affix or a special little feature here and there. And then the way they monetized that was they just sold the game and then they did a couple of expansions. But this is going to have more monetization, which means it's going to have more developers. It's going to have more of a impetus to deliver more meaty content over time. So I'm fully expecting this to be like almost like soft World of Warcraft, where they add like entire new areas, they add like new bosses and all kinds of new features. So, um, if you are going to get into Diablo 4, you should come at it with a mentality of like, I'm in this for the long haul.
Mhm.
It's probably not going to be a one and done kind of affair. Probably. I mean, it will be for a lot of people, I suppose, because it is going to have this great story and stuff. But the way I'm thinking about it is, this is the way it's going to be at launch, and then over time, it's going to improve, and it's going to improve, and it's going to improve. So, I'm just sold on it now, and I just sort of like I didn't want to go through the beta again, and I just kind of thought, you know what, I think I am just gonna put it to one side now and just wait for launch and then experience it all properly. But Necromancer was awesome. What I played of it, and you know the man on the druid when you change forms, where like all your flesh peels off and you can see all the
Yeah, that
muscles and
animation's so good.
amazing. Like what
Oh,
the hell? It's so creepy, but awesome.
'cause that's what I think a lot of us fell in love with Diablo 1 and 2 because of that, at the time, hyper realistic art style, and everything was gritty and gross and had this realism to it that was almost made it a horror game. Like in a lot of ways, there was environments and areas where it was just legitimately scary, and it seems like Diablo 4 took, the criticism and feedback from 3 in regards to the art style and was really leaning into that. So like you said, the druid animation, you fully see that flesh peel back and you have this really vivid transformation between human and beast, and I think that's really really great. So I do want to talk a little bit more about the MMO components, but before I do, I want to give a shout out to all the amazing people joining us for the big episode 100. If you're digging the show, hit that like button, share it out. If you're new to the show, we are live every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. I see Jeff Grubb in the house. I see Paris in the house. I see Benyabik, Assassin, Mr. Joanna Dark. A lot of amazing people tuning in week after week, showing support. Appreciate you guys. Jez, you talked about this being an MMO, and it is 100% true. This feels like an evolution of Diablo 2 and 3 in some ways in terms of the core gameplay, but the overarching loop honestly feels a lot more like World of Warcraft and even Destiny in some ways. So, as someone who's loved Diablo and loved the traditional Diablo experience, I guess my biggest question mark is what the MMO-like components are going to mean for the full game. Because in the beta, I kind of found it weird the way the story progressed when you played in co-op. It was very segmented. Everyone had to talk to people individually, and it felt very much like an MMO in that regard, where everyone would group up at a point and you'd sit there and wait for everybody to finish their cutscene. And I thought that was kind of strange. But I know you love WoW, so I'm curious to get your read on how Diablo has transitioned to the MMO space.
I mean, this is an issue of a lot of co-op games, I think, where when you are playing in co-op and you're on voice comms with people, paying attention to the story becomes hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always played Halo in co-op, like Halo 1, 2, and 3, and 4. I always played in co-op. I never played it solo. So I didn't have a clue what the story was. I didn't know what the story of Halo was at all because I never paid attention to it. Because when the cutscenes were playing out, I'd be chatting with a friend or something. I wouldn't be paying attention to the cutscenes. So I don't think any game has really solved this. Like that's a lie. The one game that I think did do it well in an MMO was Star Wars: The Old Republic. Because what that did was when Star Wars: The Old Republic, when you're in a cutscene, it was not just you, but your entire party in the cutscene, and it had Bioware because it's a Bioware game, and it had Bioware dialogue boxes that everyone could select a response in, and then each character in the group would do their response. So it was like the whole party was participating in this cutscene. But I can imagine that was a hell of a lot of work to pull that off because no other game has ever done that.
No,
Like
no.
BioWare's like, okay, this is how you do co-op in an RPG, co-op story delivery in an RPG. They showed everyone how to do it, and nobody else did it. And I'm guessing that's because it's really, really expensive to do it that way. But it
That's
worked
cool,
really well.
but nah, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was awesome in Star Wars: The Republic. It was really cool, but it was really cool. But the first time, it was really cool. But like on subsequent, because you'd be doing the dungeon run, right? And some of these dungeons, they had cutscenes in the middle of the dungeon. So like you'd had to do your dialogue, the whole BioWare cutscene with the dialogue wheel and your moral decisions. You'd have to do that every time you went through the dungeon because it's an MMO. Dungeons are very repeatable content. Doing that cutscene every single time becomes a drag. At that point you want to skip it, right?
Exactly.
So
Yes.
yeah. So eventually they did in subsequent Star Wars: The Old Republic expansions, they did pull back on some of that stuff a little bit. Well, they added like an auto opt out or something at the start of the dungeon or something like that. I can't remember how they did it, but it's problematic. Is the point? So I think like it's always going to be a little bit rough when you do play these games in co-op that have a heavy story emphasis, which is why I'm going to just play solo. I think. Well, my first run through the game, I'm probably just going to play it completely solo, just so I can fully absorb the story and the lore. Because I don't think any RPG does a co-op story delivery that well.
It's it's a
And
really tough
you're a
balance.
distraction. Or the
Yeah.
humans are distracting. So yeah.
I think that's very well said. I think honestly it feels better as a single player game from what I've played so far. It feels like Elder Scrolls Online in a way where it's like I almost want to play through the story single player because it presents itself better, but I've traditionally played all of the Diablo games in co-op. So I'm a little torn. If you're a single player, if you're a solo player, it's a great experience, but if you're a co-op player, it's kind of a weird disjointed experience. And like you said, outside of the Old Republic, nobody's really figured out a great way in an MMO space to do storytelling in that way. And it would have been cool to see all of your squad there for a cutscene and have the squad get addressed. But I understand that that's different dialogue, that's different VO, that's different rendering for all of these characters and all of these cutscenes. And I understand that's a lot. So there's already your character is in cutscenes, which I think is really cool. I think that's a nice touch. You get to customize your character, and that character's represented in the game, which is cool. But then when you play with the squad, everyone's just kind of like doing their own thing together, which is a big complaint I have with a lot of MMOs. But outside of that, it's exactly what I wanted Diablo 4 to be in terms of the gameplay, in terms of going back to the RPG and being able to actually specialize. Like when I did the Sorcerer, one of my biggest complaints of Diablo 3 is while it was fun, you couldn't really spec because there was so much freedom to just change your skills on the fly, which was nice, but it didn't feel like you were distinct. When you were a witch doctor, I'm not a witch doctor in this tree. But when I was playing as the Sorcerer, I went 100% Frost, and I could invest all of my points exclusively into Frost, and I could be like a Frost mage. So I thought that was a nice touch and a nice way to, re-emphasize the RPG nature of it, and re-incentivize making a second Necromancer or a second Sorcerer, because each time you play it, it's going to be a little bit different. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to a couple super chats here. First up, we got Assassin. He says, "Good afternoon, gentlemen. Played a good 2 hours of Diablo 4, my first Diablo game. Oh, congrats on your first Diablo game. And after 4 hours of RE4 Remake, had to force myself to go to bed. Ooh, RE4 Remake is a slapper, and we're going to be talking about that in just a second. A couple super chats here from Jacob Novick. Hello, long time no see. 2 questions. Do you think Xbox rethinks their summer showcase if they'll get ABK before the event? And if so, how much? And 2, how will BlizzCon and the Game Awards look? Will Xbox or ABK present every COD from now on? Jacob, I'm glad you asked. We will cover those things. I have some sections specifically for those. So just hang around. We'll get to that, I promise. Jacob Novak with another. Would Xbox consider including Xbox IPs and Overwatch stuff like the map Blizzard World and skins? People forget the Overwatch team made a blue-red Spartan Halo-type suit for Soldier 76, which they want to add in the game if ABK. Do you think, let's say this all goes through, do you think we're going to get some epic Overwatch and Halo or Xbox IP crossovers, dude?
Yes, actually. I think this might have happened anyway, but I think it's more likely to happen now with Overwatch already starting to do crossovers. And there was actually a big Overwatch blog post yesterday where the creative director was reflecting on some of the changes they've been making lately. And he did mention that they considered their recent One Piece crossover to be a success, and that they're going to debut another major crossover later on in the year. So yeah, they are open to crossover content, and I think you are going to start seeing more of those crossovers. And I think if Microsoft but this is the other thing, right? Microsoft isn't going to force that stuff. They would feel like they have to earn that stuff. I know how Phil and I know how the team thinks about this stuff, and they're not just going to force Halo into Overwatch because it'll look ham-fisted, right? It looked ham-fisted and desperate. And collaborations need to be something that benefits both parties, right? So like if Halo was doing really well and if Halo was really big and it was going to be something that, would benefit both sides, then I think Microsoft would do it. But I think they're not going to force it just to sort of shore up Halo because, like I say, it'll look forced. So while I do think some of this stuff is possible, I think that we could definitely see it for some of the maybe more pop successful things. I wouldn't be surprised if we see like Minecraft gadgets appear in Overwatch, for example, because they've got those little ornaments in Minecraft Overwatch now, which nobody uses, but but they are there.
But they're there. Yeah,
Um,
exactly. They're there.
yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if over time we start seeing some of this stuff. But I'm also hyper aware of the fact that Microsoft won't wanna piss off the Blizzard fan base, right? They won't wanna look like they're just trying to take over Blizzard or encroach on what Blizzard is. So I think it's more likely we might see Blizzard stuff appear in some of Microsoft's games first, like Overwatch in Minecraft, for example. I would not be surprised if we see some of that stuff. But yeah, over time it'll happen, but maybe not all of a sudden, right away.
Exactly. Yeah, again, like you said, the leadership team wants to make all of these relationships seem natural and organic. So they're not going to come in and mandate, like, all right, we own you. Master Chief needs to be in Overwatch. Get it done, figure it out. That
Yeah.
being said, as we've seen with Fortnite, people love crossovers, and crossovers have this brand appeal and this power to pull people into a game. I remember when Dragon Ball Z was added to Fortnite, you had so many people who had never played Fortnite or hadn't touched Fortnite in years say, "Oh shit, I'm buying Goku." And that's kind of the power of some of these crossovers. So I've talked about this with Halo previously, but I think Halo is really missing out on that. I know they have to cater to the lore, which I think is a huge detriment to the overall game, if I'm being honest, because they
It
could
is.
pull in, like, Sea of Thieves does it. Sea of Thieves finds a way to like add these cool resources without impacting the lore, and that's a hyper lore focused game. So that's something Xbox could do better. We've seen it with Killer Instinct, and how hype was that to have the Arbiter and General Ram and Killer Instinct? That was awesome, and I want to see more of that.
Yeah, it comes back to Microsoft feeling like they have to earn it. And I think they're a bit, maybe even a little bit embarrassed about the state of Halo right now. But there's one franchise where I could see it happening a little bit more, which is Heroes of the Storm, which is the Blizzard's on hiatus MOBA, which is in maintenance mode. Like that is one game where it's like collaboration with Halo would help that game. You could get interest for Heroes of the Storm to a new audience if you put Master Chief in there, or you put Doom Guy in there, or any one of other Microsoft's prolific characters in there. Like that is one game that I think would be really helped by that, which is one thing I advocate for. But it's also a game that's very heavily in maintenance mode right now, even though thousands of people still play it. Like it's not enough for Activision Blizzard, but it's like, will it be enough for Microsoft? I think it could be.
I
But
think it could be. Yeah, thousands of players. That's still a healthy group of people committed to a game. So yeah, more
yeah.
crossovers in general. Let's go. Just, I want to talk a little bit, not too much, a little bit about Resident Evil 4 Remake now that it's out in the world. Gene Park and I talked about it last week. We talked about the glowing reviews. I know you handled the review for Windows Central. I just wrapped the game up a couple days ago, so I've gone through it as well. Obviously, it was one of the best reviewed games of the year. Obviously, this is a remake of one of the best games of all time, one of the most beloved games of all time. And Capcom has been on a huge hot streak when it comes to Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 3 Remake, and now Resident Evil 4 Remake. They have they have this incredible legacy of somehow reinventing and rekindling the love of games that people consider to be some of the best games of all time. So, what are the greatest strengths of Resident Evil 4 Remake in your eyes?
Resident Evil 4 Remake, like I think the thing that I was most impressed with about the game was the engine. Like the Resident Evil RE engine, they call it, is just it's magic, it's wizardry. It's just it's delectable. It's just
Oh,
gorgeous.
delectable, like
Yeah.
that.
It's just exquisite.
Oh, it's
It's
delish.
it's so detailed, and it's the first game that had like ray tracing on console that I felt didn't overly impact performance.
You could get
Like
close
a
to
lot,
60, like with ray tracing.
yeah, it's like I played the whole game in performance mode with ray tracing turned on, and I saw very little performance degradation. The only times when the frame rate dipped was when there was heavy weather effects and stuff. But then later on, I was like, I'm going to try it in resolution mode now, and even that was mostly 60 frames with ray tracing turned on. Amazing. So hang on a sec.
Yeah, so I definitely agree. The engine looks absolutely beautiful. The RE engine, as Capcom has proven over the last several years, can really do anything. We got Devil May Cry in there. We got Monster Hunter in there. We have Resident Evil in there. All these games look good. All these games play beautifully. And more importantly, there's a lot of dynamics to what you can code for the overall gameplay in RE engine. So we know we've seen Halo Infinite. It's rumored they've been struggling with slip space, and it is incredibly difficult to build your own engine and have it be versatile. But man, Capcom is a shining example of if you can do it, if you can figure it out and make it work, you can ride that thing for years. It launched with RE7, and it's been going strong ever since. So Resident Evil 4 Remake, one of the biggest strengths for me is the way it surprises me as a fan of Resident Evil 4, someone who's replayed Resident Evil 4 on GameCube, PS2, Wii, Xbox 360, Xbox One. The number of times I have bought and replayed Resident Evil 4 is staggering. So going into this, I wasn't really sure where that would land. I was expecting it to be much like Resident Evil 2, where they change a lot. But it is a very faithful remake in a lot of the big moments, which is funny because I replayed it, probably last October. And I remember thinking to myself, I love this game, but it's so dumb. There's so many dumb, stupid moments that make no sense in this game. I'm not going to spoil it for people who haven't played it yet, but they managed to keep a lot of those big moments, but surprise you throughout the way. So constantly, like, I'm going through and I'm like, oh, I know how this is going to play out. I grab this thing, I go here, and then this is going to happen. And then boom, they would throw a huge curveball and I'm like, oh, damn, this wasn't in the original. And they kept me on my toes throughout it. And there's this like nice cadence of like, they let you fall into that comfortable rhythm of understanding how the original works. But then boom, just like that, a huge wrinkle, a huge new enemy or a new moment happens that was not in the original that just completely elevates it. And they also managed to tell a more cohesive story. So I found myself liking and connecting with a lot more characters in this because it was just way more believable. Which is funny considering the story of the game, considering the moments in the game. So to have like some of these emotional beats hit, I was like, damn, all right, Capcom, respect. I didn't think you could make this story ever make sense, but you did. And so, yeah, it's amazing. My first playthrough took me about 15 hours, so it's pretty good length too.
Yeah, it's a beefy game. Like I think my first playthrough was 17 hours, and some of that was trying to find collectibles for guide writing and stuff. So like you know, and then I went straight into New Game Plus, which you know you keep all your weapons, so makes New Game Plus really fun as well because and you can bump up the difficulty as well if you fancy and
Yes.
but honestly, like I think most people should play this on hardcore straight away. Personally, I thought normal mode was a little bit too easy. But dude, like it's different for me with regards to Resident Evil 4 because I didn't like the original.
Oh no.
Yeah. So like I'm you know if Jeff Grubb's still there, he's probably panicking right now. But
No,
when I was
Jez, don't say
dude,
it. No.
dude, seriously, when I was a kid, right? When I was a kid, Resident Evil was my my top franchise, man. It was like there was two franchises for me. It was Final Fantasy and Resident Evil. Resident Evil 2 and 3, two of my favorite games of all time. You know, I was so hyped for Resident Evil 2, and I think Resident Evil 2 was the first video game hype cycle that I was like a part of. You know, buying all the magazines. I wanted to know every scrap of information there was about Resident Evil 2. You know, just as a slight aside, I remember in one of these magazines, there was like a really bad joke where there was like a little screenshot of a mosquito buzzing around one of the lamps in Resident Evil 2 and a caption that said, everyone knows the mosquitoes are Resident Evil 2's most dangerous enemy. I believed that when I was a kid. I believed that. Even though the mosquitoes were just part of the static background, I was like, oh shit, I've got to avoid these mosquitoes. Yeah. So I was trying to avoid the mosquitoes that weren't even enemies because of this fake news printed in the magazine. Well, it was like meant to be a joke, I guess, but it didn't land for me as a kid. But anyway, I love Resident Evil 2 and 3, and I hated what they did with Resident Evil 4, man. I was like, why are these monsters dropping bullets? Why do I not have to find ammo anymore? Why can't I just buy it? I was like, dude, this is an arcade game now. This is not my Resident Evil, you know? So I didn't even finish it.
It was a huge departure, because the first Resident Evil I ever played was Resident Evil Director's Cut. And I've talked about this previously, but I was at Toys R Us as like a really young kid, and I had Resident Evil Director's Cut, and then this weird Pikachu Tamagotchi that would surf. I forget, it was like a pedometer with a Pikachu. I forget what it was called. And I had both of those in my hand, and I was trying to, because my mom's like, you can only pick one. All right, you have a $20 limit. Pick one of these. So I had the Director's Cut of Resident Evil and this little Pikachu Tamagotchi. And then I remember taking Resident Evil Director's Cut to my mom, and I want to say I was like 6 or 7. I was way too young. And she looks at it and she says, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah, this looks cool." And I took it home, and I remember only being able to play it in like 20-minute bursts because it was way too scary. And then when Resident Evil 2 hit, I was there day one. Resident Evil 3 as well. And then Resident Evil 4, shout out to the GameCube, the original home of Resident Evil 4. I remember that game flooring me. Again, it wasn't as scary. It was a tonal shift, way more action, but it had all these moments of discovery. Like when you fight the El Gigante for the first time, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna cheese him in the shack. I'm gonna just hide in the shack and shoot through the window and kill him. Because that's, games were basic. You could do that in most games because they didn't have physics that you could interact with. And I remember thinking that to myself, hiding in the shack, and that ogre just smashes the shack. And I'm like, oh, what? You can do that in a video game? And it had so many moments like that. So I agree. I understand why people were upset, because that was the catalyst for Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6, the pure action, the Michael Bay era of Resident Evil. But man, love the original, love this remake so much. So would you say you like the remake a lot more than the original then?
Well, kind of, man. It's really hard because I separated, like, there's feelings-based Jez and facts-based Jez. Facts-based Jez knows it's a great game. It's an amazing game. Technical marvel, really fun to play. It's really fun shooter. Really fun shooter. But feelings-based Jez, I don't want this kind of Resident Evil. I really don't. I really want the dark, foreboding Resident Evil 2 style Resident Evil. And I ain't gonna spoil it, but Resident Evil 4 stays very faithful to that Michael Bay era of Resident Evil. Unapologetically so. Unapologetically so. I do not want to see Resident Evil 5 remade. I hated that game so damn much. It was so dumb. So dumb.
Oh,
Total global saturation, punching the boulder. It was just dumb. It was like a parody of Resident Evil. It was an insult to Resident Evil. I do not want to see Resident Evil 5 or 6 ever come out ever.
I got some bad news. Again, I'm not gonna spoil it, but as someone who does love me some Resident Evil 5, because it is terrible. It is a B action movie in the best way possible. It's a bad horror game. If you want Resident Evil 5 to be a horror game, it's not. It's a really terrible, awful horror game, but it is one of the best period action co-op games that has ever been made. I have played Resident Evil 5 through more times than any other Resident Evil by a magnitude of 10. I've beaten that game so many times because just the moment-to-moment action is so good. The gameplay is so good, and there is nothing on earth that matches the feeling of a co-op Resident Evil game. We've had plenty of co-op games over the years, but man, Resident Evil 5 was such a dope moment, and I remember just being floored when that game hit because of what you could do in a multiplayer game. I understand why people hate it. I'm replaying it right now, and I'm at the part where you're in the back of the Humvee just shooting the El Gigante in the face, and his face is just jiggling. And now you're like, how do you take that serious? You can't take it seriously. So I understand why people don't like it. But that being said, as I'm playing through Resident Evil 4, as I'm seeing some of these new enemies, as I'm seeing some of these new mechanics, as I'm seeing more emphasis on like duo moments, I'm like, oh, babe, Resident Evil 5 is next. I would bet money that Resident Evil 5 will be the next Resident Evil that gets remade because they have set the groundwork with Resident Evil 4, baby. So let's go boulder punching in 4K with ray tracing. It's happening. Prepare your bodies for it. It's coming, Jez.
Oh man. See, what I was kind of hoping they'd do, right, was like sort of soft reset the lore. And and they kind of did do that in some ways. And if we're assuming the new Resident Evil 2, the new Resident Evil 3, and the new Resident Evil 4 are now the official canon, there are some small changes they've made to the story arc in a way. But like I was hoping they'd lead it more dramatically into like a full reboot of the story of Resident Evil 5 and 6 to make them a little bit more respectable as entries in the franchise, because Resident Evil 7 and 8 are so damn good. See, that's the kind of Resident Evil I want. One that is action heavy but is also genuinely scary,
I want that balance. I like both.
foreboding.
I'm with you. I love Resident Evil 7 is one of my favorite. It's probably number 2 of my favorite Resident Evil games right now. It probably goes Resident Evil 2 remake and then RE7, because RE7 is the scariest Resident Evil game by far. That game celebrated horror. So I don't want the horror to be gone, but I also love me some co-op. So I'm a little torn, Jez. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. I mean, when you were saying that Resident Evil 5 is the Resident Evil you've played the most, sitting here, you probably wouldn't, listening to me bitch about it, you probably wouldn't believe that it's also the Resident Evil I probably played the most as well. Me and my brother played the hell out of that game, and I hated every minute of it. Nah, like, what's the thing? It's like I don't want that from my mainline Resident Evil. Why don't they just make Resident Evil Revelations, the co-op Resident Evil games, and focus a whole series of spin-offs and dedicate that to co-op? I'd be fine with that. I want the mainline Resident Evils to give me that core Resident Evil horror isolated solo experience, But I don't mind the fact that the co-op Resident Evil exists, because they are fun, I even play like Revelations 2 was fun. It was dumb and sort of low budget, but I had a lot of fun with it, But it's just, again, it's a completely different mood to the likes of Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8. Resident Evil 8 to me felt really it wasn't as spooky or anything, but it was still that kind of core Resident Evil experience, the scary stuff that I wanted. But again, what I want isn't always like what's best, and if more people prefer the action oriented, that's great, and clearly more people do, I think, which is why I thoroughly expect what happened with Capcom before to happen all over again, which is where the sales of Resident Evil 4 are going to be absolutely massive. They interpret that as, oh, action is better, and then the franchise loses its identity, and we go through this cycle again of Resident Evil losing its relevance while they try and make it into an action game because they think that's what people want, and people think that's what they want, and then Resident Evil loses its identity and then becomes generic and then goes into a Resident Evil 6 cycle again, But
I hope they've learned their lesson and they keep the mainline games as they've been doing. Like, I love 7, I love 8. I think 7 is one of the most important games for Capcom's history ever. It reinvented everything that they do, the way that they approach games. They translated that to Monster Hunter World. They translated that to all these other franchises. And now they're in this renaissance because they're not afraid to shake up IP, shake up the foundation of what these games are. So I hope they manage to straddle that line between both. Give us a horror game, because they know Resident Evil 7 is still one of the best-selling Resident Evil games of all time. They know people want true horror. So I hope that they don't overcorrect and only do action. I hope they can find a way to do both. And considering the fact that they're all in on Resident Evil, baby, the number of Resident Evil games they're cranking out right now is astronomical. So I think they understand that there is a place for both and that people want both. And I hope they deliver both, because I don't want it to be I only get action Resident Evil, because I love the horror Resident Evil games. So I want 5 and I want Resident Evil 9 to be scary as hell. That's the world that I want to live in.
Yeah.
And if they can do both,
if they can do both, great. But that's why I always thought Revelations existed. Let Revelations be that. But hey, what do I know?
What do we know? All right. Well, that was again, plenty of ranting about Resident Evil 4. If you haven't played it, play it. The game kicks so much ass. I'm gearing up for playthrough number 2 with that unlimited shotgun, baby. And I'm just going to be dominating. I got to catch up on some super chats. Y'all have been killing it, crushing it. Appreciate all the support. Appreciate all the amazing people tuning in. If you are digging the show, hit that like button. Share it out. We still got to talk about the state of Xbox. We still got to talk about Redfall. We got to talk about ABK maybe finally being over and a lot more. Anthony says, we got the dynamic duo back for the 100th episode. What a blessed treat. Super proud of you, my dude. The cheeseburger. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you. Thanks for showing some love. Love seeing that cheeseburger. We got Buddy McClure, who is now a member of the channel. Shout out. Love seeing those burgers in the chat. Mr. Joanna Dark with the super chat says, congratulations on 100 episodes to the GOAT, Miles Dompier. This question is for Jez. Should Capcom remake Code Veronica next over RE? Second, would you like to see a Gears and StarCraft crossover game that is a third-person game? Okay. Jez, so first question, what Code Veronica, should that be the next remake?
I would love to see a Code Veronica remake over Resident Evil 5.
Boo!
Yeah. But not only that, I would love to see Dino Crisis remade over Resident Evil 5. Like,
yes.
People are begging for this shit, man. And they're giving us this sort of tease of Exo Primal. Like, everyone thought that was going to be Dino Crisis. And it's just like, why don't you just do it? Why don't you just give us Dino Crisis? Like, literally everyone's asking for this. Dinosaurs are hot as hell right now. And unique. Like, nobody's doing dinosaurs. And the RE engine does dinosaurs pretty well, judging from Exo Primal. But I have literally no idea why they aren't potentially doing this. But anyway.
Maybe, hear me out.
There's a lot of things I want to see before Resident Evil 5 remake.
Maybe Exoprimal is hey, we're working on the dinosaur models. We have a bunch of dinosaur models that we're working on for Dino Crisis. While we wait to work on Dino Crisis, let's slap a game out there. Let's slap a little Overwatch meets Earth Defense Force game out there to get some money coming in while we work on Dino Crisis. Is that possible? You think that's it? Or
I don't know, man.
I don't know. I don't know either.
The dinosaurs in Exoprimal aren't accurate, man. They aren't accurate. You might have seen me bitching on Twitter about this, but they're not accurate to real life. They're accurate to, and this is weird. They're accurate to Jurassic Park.
Yeah, hell yeah.
So it's so strange, right? Because Jurassic Park obviously is very old, right? And we're now straying into paleontology territory. So buckle in. But Jurassic Park is very old, right? And a lot of the fossil record has changed since then. Like, new fossils come to light, new research has come to light. The theory that dinosaurs had feathers is pretty much proven now.
Mm-hmm.
They've got tons of evidence that, you know, the T-Rex was basically just a giant chicken. It was literally just a giant chicken, right? But because of Jurassic Park, everyone's in their mind has got a different idea of what the T-Rex is meant to be.
Forever tainted. Forever, it's going to be
forever
Jurassic Park.
Yeah, and the Exoprimal does that. So I would like to think if they did do Dino Crisis remake, it would be the biologically accurate versions of dinosaurs. I don't know, but I want to believe it, man. But I also don't want to get my hopes up. I want to believe. You know, it's one of them.
And his second part of that question: do you want to see StarCraft meets Gears of War as a third-person shooter?
No, I think that'd be really weird to mix those franchises together. I mean, if you mean like a full-blown story crossover, I don't think that makes any sense at all. But if you mean like a StarCraft game with Gears of War gameplay, yes, I would love to see that. And I think like StarCraft is the perfect kind of game for that. Because, you know, it's Space Marines in heavy armor, huge shoulders. You know, the soldier models in StarCraft literally look like Gears of War characters. So it just makes a hell of a lot of sense. And there's no developer out there who would be great for that than the Coalition. So we'll see what happens. We'll see
exactly. A few more super chats because y'all crushing it. Nick W says RE Remake has more epic boss fights. RE4 Original is harder. Found RE4 Remake to be very easy on standard. You commented on that. I went through and played. I feel the opposite. I don't know. Like I replayed Resident Evil 4 the original very recently and breezed through it. And maybe because I've done it so many times, but I feel like the remake throws way, way, way more enemies at you. They give you better like options, like the knife parry and combat, but I also feel like they are it's a gauntlet. Every time you have a fight, it's a damn gauntlet to get through.
I mean, it can be like stressy, kind of like in Resident Evil 4 when there's like tons and tons of enemies that they throw at you, and you're running around picking up the ammo they drop while even more enemies are spawning. It can be stressy in that context, but I never felt like that kind of like that desperation you feel in other Resident Evil games where it's like you're entering a new area maybe and you've only got 2 shotgun shells.
Yeah, exactly. You enter a new area and you're always kitted out. You got grenades out the ass.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I remember in Resident Evil 7, the first time you go into the basement, and I was like, you just know because it's dark as hell in there, and there's like mortuary stuff in there, and I'm sitting there thinking like, I know some shit's gonna go down in here, and they lead you on to think that for ages nothing happens in that basement. Nothing happens for it's so well done, man. Nothing happens in that basement for ages, and you're proper like sitting there in fear with no bullets left, and it's like, damn, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? And then, yeah, you pick up a key item, and all hell breaks loose. And it's Resident Evil 4 just doesn't have that. It's just constant, all hell breaks loose, and it needs to constantly feed you ammunition to keep the hell breaking loose viable. So I never felt that fear playing Resident Evil 4 at all, but it was just so much damn fun. It's so satisfying kicking people in the face. The shotgun cuts people in half. It's so much fun. Like, so I was like, while like my inner child still felt betrayed by the fact that it wasn't a pure survival horror game, I was just having so much fun that I was like, I'm over it. This is a blast. I'm loving it.
The scene you talk about in RE7, that's what we in the business call a tight butthole moment. Where you're in that you're in that basement and your cheeks are clenched the entire time because they're not going to put you in this dark, scary place for no reason and have nothing happen. But like you said, they drag it out, so you're sitting there sweating for 10 minutes, like waiting, and then it hits you, like, damn it, I knew it. I knew it was coming, and they still got me. But like you said, Resident Evil 4, pure fun. Just pure, stupid fun. There are some scary moments, but it's not a scary game overall. Nick W. says, RE Village was great until the factory, and RE7 was great until the ship. Resident Evil, historically, always has nonsense endings. They always, for whatever reason, at the end of the game, they say, oh, damn, but what if a secret research facility? Or damn, what if this plot twist? And we're going to take you to a wild, wacky location that 100% of the time is an underground bunker. Every single time. It's like, well, here's the secret facility. And so I agree. Every single time Resident Evil does that, we're like, yeah, Resident Evil 7, the first 80% of Resident Evil 7 is the perfect horror game. Like, they should study the first 80% of Resident Evil 7 in game design school, because that is perfect pacing, perfect game. And then you get to the end, you're like, all right, dog, what happened? Who made this call? Why did shit go off the rails so hard?
I didn't mind that. I thought it was all right, but I can't really remember the full context about what
I didn't hate it. It was just you go from like fun, just perfect, a perfect game, to okay, this is just weird. Like, I know Resident Evil,
it does start speeding up to a breakneck pace towards the end, but I kind of took that as they've run out of budget and they're going to ship the game now.
We got to wrap this up.
They just got to wrap it up. So I can't. A lot of games seem to do this, especially Capcom games, actually, where it's like towards the end they all sort of go crazy. And I've always interpreted that in my head. My head canon is they've run out of money and got a ship. And I think that's like trauma from the final 2 episodes of Evangelion, maybe. Evangelion, rather. I always pronounce that wrong first time.
Yeah, they're like, hey, we got to wrap this up. Throw him in a mine shaft and give him an assault rifle. Let's end this thing. All right, let's do it. We're done. Put a weird grandma tentacle monster at the end and get Chris in on a helicopter. Bam. Let's go. Okay, one more super chat, and then we're gonna move on. Y'all are killing it though. Yo, Donnie, the newest producer of Xbox Chaturdays. What up, boy? Appreciate you showing some love, showing some support. Not only does he tune in and mod like a boss pretty much every week, but he's throwing down some support to be a channel producer. Appreciate you, dude. Assassin, I'm guessing it's too early to talk about what's going to be at Xbox's E3 2023. Yes, don't worry, that's coming. Hang around. Friends and I were talking and worried they won't deliver first party wise. We will discuss it. All right, we're going to be discussing the state of Xbox. But first, I want to talk about Redfall, Jez, because you and I were both in the camp of like, hey, guess what? You don't get to go preview Redfall this past week. With all of the GDC festivities, a lot of people, I think it was 2 weeks ago, they got to fly out to LA and they got to go hands-on and play Redfall, which is one of my most anticipated games of the year. I'm a big fan of co-op, I'm a big fan of horror, and Arcane has proven that they know how to make compelling games with a lot of player agency. So I've been looking forward to it. And this week we got to see a lot of previews. And there's been some other controversy due to some interviews that we will touch on. But first, I want to talk about how you're feeling based on what we've seen of Redfall so far in terms of the world and gameplay.
Well, I'm kind of mixed on Redfall, right? And the reason for this is I'm a huge fan of Prey. Prey is one of my favorite games, maybe of all time. It was kind of like the BioShock sequel I always wanted but didn't get, and it was kind of like, you know, a sort of consolation in a world where Deus Ex is on hiatus. It was the immersive sim that I feel like we just don't get anymore generally. You know, it was a perfect kind of game for me. And which is why I've been disappointed with Arcane's output in recent years. Like Deathloop,
Okay.
I thought Deathloop was aggressively mid. Like I just thought it was just I just couldn't gel with it at all. I was like, man, what is this game? And I'm just not interested in it. Combat's bad, and I don't really care about the world, and the fact that the gameplay loop, the whole loop thing really irritated me. I thought it was just really boring having to do the same thing over and over again. And yeah, I just didn't gel with it at all. So I'm just kind of like with light of what Deathloop has been, I'm kind of wondering, have they kind of lost their touch? You know, are
Oh
they have they
no.
lost?
Oh
Yeah, I'm
no.
kind of wondering that. I'm sitting here wondering that, man.
I
So
I got to chime in real quick on Deathloop because I agree in a lot of ways. I remember being jazzed about it. I bought it day one on PlayStation 5 because I had so many people I trust and respect in terms of their opinion talk about how Deathloop was this huge evolution for the team and their gameplay. And I remember playing it, and I played it for about 3 hours, and then I was done. I had no interest to continue the story. I
same,
had no
same.
interest in closing the loop or whatever the loop of the game was, and it really didn't connect for me at all, and I was really disappointed because yeah, I threw down money day one to play it and was expecting it to be, a great game. And I'm not going to say it's a bad game because that's not fair. It's not what I wanted at all from the
Not
game.
what I wanted. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could see like they'd put a lot into it. Like when you go around and there's a lot of lore and the complexity of trying to do that game where all the characters overlap and stuff like that. That was impressive. It was an impressive feat of design that they were able to do that. I just don't think it made for a very fun video game.
I
This is why,
agree.
like,
It was not that
yeah.
fun. It wasn't a fun game for me.
Yeah, I saw, yes. So I don't know. I mean, if you some people really liked it, and I think game journalists were very impressed with it on a technical level and a design level. But yeah, I just don't think it was very fun. But it's with that in mind where I'm just kind of like I'm just thinking like I need to get my hands on Redfall and experience it for myself maybe, because it's not doing it for me in any of the video previews and stuff like that. But neither did Prey. Which is the thing that I'm thinking is like, well, all the stuff I'd seen of Prey leading up to actually playing it, I was just kind of like, I'm not that interested in this game. It doesn't look that good. It looks kind of like a Half-Life rip-off or whatever, something like that. I was kind of thinking, but then I got my hands on it and I just loved it and played it from start to finish without, playing anything else or getting distracted, which is rare for me. I get distracted really easily. So I so yeah, I'm just kind of like, yeah, jury jury's out, I suppose. And I'll play it for myself. It's in Game Pass, so no huge commitment there to make to try it out, and we'll see how it goes. But it's a shame though, Miles, because a lot of the a lot of the previews were overshadowed by some comments that the game director made to IGN.
I know that's why we're going to talk about that, because I really do want to talk about the game itself and what we've seen, because I think overall the world that I've seen with Redfall is one of the most compelling for me as a horror fan, as someone who loves 80s horror, who loves Stephen King's atmosphere. This feels like a world that would exist in a Stephen King novel, and then for them to bring that to life in this co-op shooter with all these supernatural abilities, that for me, that's right up my alley. I love co-op, I love horror. But like you said, some people I've talked to have been kind of critical on the gunplay in particular, and people I've talked to who went hands-on have been kind of mixed as well. I've heard positive things. I've heard the gunplay feels, good enough. It feels good. And then I've had people say the gunplay for me was underwhelming. And when your game is a shooter, that gunplay needs to feel really good. And so I think
What someone told me was, someone who played it, it's not the gunplay, but it's the way enemies react to the being shot. Like
Okay.
they feel spongy, bullet spongy, and they don't react very. Like I think a lot of games when it comes to gunplay, it's not the guns themselves that make the gunplay feel good. It's the way the enemies take the bullets. Do their arms fly off, or do they explode in
Yes.
bloody cascades
That
of
you want
gore
that
and stuff like that?
feedback that you
You want,
did
yeah, the
damage to
feedback,
them.
the impact. Yeah, exactly. So I think that was what they were basically saying to me, was the enemies didn't have that sort of tactile feel. But yeah, it's hard to gauge from watching the videos and not playing it for yourself. So I'm just gonna
Exactly.
check it out for myself.
I know I need to go hands on to really fairly judge it. Because for me it's going to be about how it feels and how the co-op elements come together. But if they can deliver a compelling world that's worth exploring, if they can deliver a satisfying gameplay loop, and they can deliver a narrative that keeps me engaged, that's for me, that's enough. For me, that's going to be a hit. And even if it isn't the best feeling shooter, because let's be real, there's a lot of competition in that space. We've had games like Doom Eternal and Halo Infinite and others come out and say, yo, this is how a shooter should feel. And the reality is, as talented as some teams are, it's going to be hard to replicate that. And we know id is helping out with the shooting in this, so hopefully that boosts them as well. But I believe id helped out with the shooting on Deathloop. And I thought the shooting in Deathloop was good, not great.
Yeah.
So that being said, I'm still very excited. And there has been a lot of positivity surrounding these previews. But what I'm most excited about are some of the anecdotes we've gotten from interviews here. And the first one I want to talk about is in regards to the narrative. And Arcane Studios' Harvey Smith basically has come out and said that this game is about killing rich people. And I thought that was pretty ballsy, pretty bold, and a satisfying thing to hear someone say during an interview. So let me read you a quote about, the theme of Redfall. And basically the question was, what's the narrative about? What's the lore about? Why did you choose horror as a setting? And so Harvey Smith said this: you can play Deus Ex, Dishonored, or Redfall just as a fun, surface-level action game, but monsters are always metaphors. There's always a thematic, whether you're aware of it or not. Prior to starting this game, we had just gone through a bunch of years from Thatcher and Reagan of tax cuts on the wealthy that undermines the infrastructure of the entire country. Bridges will be falling apart, and people whose kids get insulin will be fucked. But let's do it anyway. It just feels predatory for the tiny elite to have better lives at the expense of everyone else. So this game, the vampires in this game are very much literally people sucking the life out of like the average individual, which I think is an interesting idea. Does that do anything for you? Does that get you more or less excited about it? I do want to give Harvey Smith just a shout out for being that candid in an interview, because you're owned by Microsoft, who they have a lot of money. They are the epitome of the wealthy elite in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like I can't help but think, like, don't cast stones when in glass houses, kind of thing about it. Because these they all own stock in their studio when they sold it,
Mm-hmm.
so they're a hell of a lot richer than I am.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just kind of like, what preach about rich people all you want. I'm sure you're doing a lot better than a lot of people out there while you're making these kind of comments. So I don't know. Some of that stuff just doesn't land for me. But yeah, sure. creator's gonna create.
Exactly,
Good
dude.
for
Gotta
them, man.
have that punk rock energy, brother.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so I just thought that was interesting. That was one of the more interesting anecdotes that I saw shared because
They
you know,
mentioned they mentioned Theranos, which I thought was interesting. Thanaros, sorry. Do you know what that is?
I don't know. What's that?
Okay, so they mentioned Thanaros, which I don't know fully what the context was that they mentioned Thanaros in, but Thanaros was this prolific medical fraud about, well, actually the court case just finished this year, and I think she was sentenced to prison, I believe. But
Okay.
basically what it was this woman, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she'd basically convinced a load of shareholders, u- purely using her charisma, that she developed a machine, an all-encompassing blood analysis machine that would like take from a drop of blood, could diagnose like hundreds of
Oh,
conditions.
yes. Okay, yes, yes. They made a documentary about this.
Yeah, they did.
Yes.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, it's on Netflix. There's a bunch of documentaries about it, and it's a really interesting study into sort of corporate hype and venture capital money, and and the whole cycle we've been through the last sort of decade with tech, of this like super low interest rates, where like throwing money at anything and everything just to see if it would stick.
Yeah.
That's sort of been the way banks have been doing business for the last 10 years. And a lot of them are collapsing now because interest rates have been put up, and they can no longer do business like that. And they've got to be a lot more careful with their money than they were previously. And some of these banks, like Silicon Valley Bank, for example, which thrive on this kind of like hype cycle of tech that ends up going nowhere, they've all folded and
Yeah.
disappeared because
Uh-huh.
of this sort of um, this greed, basically. So like that's an interesting way to feed it in, because Thanaros or Thanaros. I don't know how to pronounce it off the top of my head. But the fact that it's like a blood sucking, but she was literally making a blood sucking machine. It's kind of vampiric in a way. And
Uh,
and a lot of these banks are like funded by giving basically ripping off and foreclosing average people at the end of the day.
yeah,
Um,
so I think
there are some interesting discussions to be made there, but I also sympathize with people who are just like who don't want to be preached at by
yeah, and that's why I'm glad they clarify
gigantic
that
game
you can
developers.
just
Yeah,
play the game as a surface level action game and not have to like worry about it being too heady or whatever.
yeah,
Because I assume the narrative beats will be very subtle. If I'm based on how arcane games work, it's not going to be like hammering you in the face for the most part when it comes to the storytelling. So, yeah, it's interesting and it's they've got some cool real life parallels they're pulling from. But again, yeah, it's easy for them in that position to say, "Oh yeah, rich people suck." Like we're comfortable, but rich people suck.
yeah.
Um,
That's interesting about that. Oh, and like blacklisting outlets who dare leak their stuff to make barely above minimum wage. They're the bad guys, right? But yeah, screw rich people too, but also video game leakers. Okay, cool.
yeah. Well, are you punk rock or are you not punk rock? All right, Arcane, pick a lane.
Yeah, pick a lane, Arcane. I don't know.
Okay, so we're going to talk about another big part of this interview with Harvey Smith. First, I want to give a shout out to Jacob Novik, who has become a supporter channel member. Let's go. More burgers in the chat. Okay. So, Jez, as you touched on, a lot of the previews, a lot of the conversations, and actually a quick shout out, we have 250 people here rocking, having a great time on this beautiful Saturday. If you were digging the show, hit that like button, share it out. We got a lot more to dive into. As you said, Jez, a lot of this has been overshadowed by some comments regarding a PlayStation 5 version of
Mm.
Redfall that once upon a time existed. They were basically asked, like, hey, is there a PlayStation 5 version? Is a PlayStation 5 version coming? And it was confirmed that there was a PlayStation 5 version in development pre-acquisition, but there was change with a capital C when Microsoft acquired Bethesda, and they said, yo, shut that down, all right? PlayStation 5 version, no more! You're
Yeah.
exclusive, baby. Whether you like it or not, no, I don't think that's how the conversation went. But I wanted to touch on that because obviously people are riled up and talking about exclusivity. And we know Microsoft has been, very kumbaya, very, hey, we want more people to play our games, more places. We're not going to take games away from other platforms. But you know the spiel. We all know the spiel. Is this a big deal? Should anyone really care at all that at one point in time there was a PlayStation 5 version of Redfall in development?
Well, we talked about this on Xbox 2, and it was funny because a lot of these sort of arguments often fall into this trap of like talking about groups of people as a collective, and it's like a lot of this stuff was like, well, you guys said Xbox had no games, now you're crying that you don't get Redfall and whatever. Like taking one person's opinion who maybe they didn't care about Redfall, and then I don't know what you call it when people do that, but taking one person's opinion and then
Just
conflating
making
it with another person.
blanket statements about entire groups of people because some
Yeah,
loudmouth on Twitter was being annoying about Redfall.
well, yeah, or multiple loudmouths, and conflating one person's opinion with another person's opinion to create a narrative. However, where it differs in this case is that there are YouTubers, and I'm not going to name names because dogpiling ain't something I do, unlike other YouTubers out there who call me out by name and try to
Some
create
people want that
drama.
drama, and
Yeah, people want that drama.
I'm
Yeah,
not a
so
fan.
no, not a fan. But there are YouTubers out there who literally said that Redfall looked mid like a few months ago, and then saying like, who cares? It's no big deal. Bethesda losing Bethesda's no big deal, or Bethesda's mid, or calling them Bugthesda and all this kind of stuff, and then doing a 180 this past week to get in on this discourse about Microsoft taking their games away. It's like, hang on, make it make sense. It's like, hang on, you didn't care about this 1 minute, and now you do care about it. Like, which one is it? Which one is it, bro?
I think they only care because of the drama and the optics that can be skewed to make Xbox look like the bad guys in this case. Is really
Yes.
so again, like I'm trying to be better just day to day, not exaggerating the small percentage of people who share those opinions because like you said, it often gets construed as like, oh, this entire group, this entire fandom feels this way when no, it's like a very small extreme group of people who are being very loud on social media and having a lot of engaged people on social media agree with them, but that's such a small fraction of this. So I'm trying to be better about it because I don't think the average person who plays video games cares all that much that there was a PlayStation 5 version of Redfall. It would be a
I don't think they even know what Redfall is.
Yeah. Like if the PlayStation 5 version was completely done, because here's the reality of the situation. The PlayStation 5 version wasn't done. They still had years of development left on this game. They still had a long roadmap. So it wasn't like, hey, PlayStation 5 version's done. We're canceling it. We're doing the Batgirl thing. It's already done. It's ready to ship, but nah, shut it down. They basically said
about that Batgirl thing.
You don't have to finish this. And as a developer, they're like, hell yeah, brother. Like, let's go. Because so many people underestimate and undermine what goes into a port. I see it so often. I've talked to developers. I wrote an entire article about how much it costs, what goes into a port. And still people are like, oh, it's like, this dev kit means you can just like flip a switch and bring it to this No, that's not how it works at all. It's not. It's a lot of work. And so when you're a developer and you have to target one less platform, you're stoked because that means less financial resources and less time. Because even like a basic port for a AAA game, we're looking at like 6 months at least. 6 months for a big budget AAA game to port from one version to another. So it is a lot of work. So it's not like this version was done and they said, we're just taking it away. They just didn't finish that version. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that as someone who essentially owns this IP.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to touch on it because it was a juicy little nugget of drama this week. Okay, but Redfall. Yeah, so overall, still excited. Overall, still going to play it. And again, that's the beauty of Xbox Game Pass. Even if you aren't sure about how it looks, you can try it out for yourself. Democratize playing, right? Sorry for the marketing terms. Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. Jacob Novick has been dropping a ton of super chats here. Let me make sure I'm all caught up on these. Okay, will Xbox consider to remake the Activision published COD Declassified? Oh, God. COD Declassified, which is a PS Vita exclusive. Sony didn't publish it, but that game had bugs through 90% of the game and are unplayable if you don't ignore the annoying bugs. Are they going to remake Call of Duty Declassified?
No, you will never see that ever again. Sorry.
Goodbye. Jacob Novik says, a COD game where you kill vampires, ghouls, monsters, hydras, myths, and more. Yeah, give me Call of Duty Zombies, but a full game. Give me that.
I think like you might see a lot more creativity out of Call of Duty when it's no longer tied to Activision shareholder culture. I think the reason it's annualized by law basically is because of Activision shareholder dividend expectations. But
Okay.
Xbox doesn't have those kind of dividend expectations because the dividends from Microsoft come from Azure. No one cares about how Xbox is doing at Microsoft. So, you know, it's a completely different kettle of fish. And I would hope that that means maybe Call of Duty can go to a 2-year cycle. Maybe they can do more creative stuff with it. I've always said they should do a Call of Duty ODST where instead of zombies you're fighting the flood or something. Uh,
Yeah, let's
or
go. Yeah, buddy.
or or do Call of Duty StarCraft where, you know, instead of zombies you're fighting the Zerg. Like a lot of these games write themselves, man. But they could do it like I don't know if you played StarCraft 1, but there's this whole political war between, you know, human factions in StarCraft 1 as well, which is really interesting and compelling narrative, you know. The Terrans are basically fascist government. So you know, then there's like a rebellion and stuff like that. So it's there's a lot of stuff they could do potentially with crossovers for Call of Duty, because let's face it, they are running out of ideas when it comes to Call of Duty. And Modern Warfare and Black Ops are basically the same, you know, with a different name at this point. And then people seem to be fed up of World War II themed Call of Duty games and stuff like that for the time being. So I don't know, man.
What's going to be
But we'll
scary is when
see.
we start getting more war games based on like current events or more very, very recent history. We've already seen tastes of that, but I
Mm,
think that's going to be what people lean into. And then it's going to be, I
God,
don't know, too
yeah,
stressful, too real.
too stressful, too real.
Jacob Novik just crushing it, dropping these. If Xbox and ABK decide together, could Activision make, if they wanted to, a non-IRL war events themed COD game, but spin-offs with Captain Price? Yeah, like Jez said, I think the overall sentiment is there's more options for creativity and experimentation with Call of Duty in a post Microsoft-owned ABK world.
Yeah, I mean that's always been the assumption is with this stuff is we're disrupting the status quo, right? Like it for me, what it was always about was, you know, Blizzard's not doing great. What would it look like if a different studio or a different platform or a different business model owned Blizzard? That's what it was always about for me. It was about disrupting that, you know, sort of the status quo, you know, the status quo of Bobby Kotick and Activision shareholder culture, which I felt has been destroying Blizzard. There was no chance for change without this deal happening. So, you know, and as someone who thoroughly expects the world to fall apart in the next decade or so, who cares about consolidation? You know, who cares about all this stuff? I always see journalists like moralists like, oh God, what will the video game industry look like in 20 years? Dude, what will society even
Will we be able
be
to
here in 20
eat?
years?
We'll be able to eat actual
Yeah, it's
food
like
in 20 years. Is that going to be a
yeah, it's
thing?
like I don't. It's not that big of a deal. It's video games, man. Like, what would the industry look like in 20 years if Microsoft buys Activision? Like, who gives a shit, man? There's like so. I will just be happy if the society still exists in 20 years, the way things are going. So yeah,
Oh God,
uh,
that's
not,
bleak,
not,
Jez.
not.
I, I
It's
don't.
bleak, but it's real, man. It's real, baby. That's
I
what you
don't
got to remember.
disagree, but I have to lie to myself every day to get out of bed. So that's where I'm at. That's how you got to
Well,
look
yeah.
at the truth and
Oh,
say,
man.
no, that can't be real. That can't be. No, it can't be the reality. Okay.
Yeah, it's
Um,
rough, man. It's rough.
it's rough. It's rough, but we're making the best of it. We're here, having fun, talking about video games, despite the impending collapse of society. All right. Next thing I want to talk about is a really cool demo that came this week that Xbox fans were excited about. And that showcased Unreal Engine 5's metahuman technology. And it also featured a new look, a little raw, basically motion cap of Hellblade 2. So if you haven't
Yes,
seen it,
my God, that
I'm
looked
watching it.
impressive.
I'm playing it live, so you can check it out for yourself. But basically, this is showcasing what's possible with Unreal Engine 5. This is Senua, a close up on her face, showcasing the fidelity and the authenticity of these facial animations for this character. Jez, holy shit, this looks absolutely stunning. Obviously, we've seen a lot of stunning glimpses of Hellblade 2, and it is looking to be an absolute graphical powerhouse, a graphical showcase. But this, again, really drives home what is possible with the future of games. How were you feeling about all of this, dude?
Like, I mean, we always knew Hellblade was going to be sort of this technically impressive, just stunning kind of game, but I kind of feel like they're exceeding expectations right now. Like that shit looked like, you know, the sort of heavily technical deepfakes you often see, like tech demos and stuff that only exist as tech demos and things that you're never going to see exist on a console because it's, it requires massive servers or something like that. To see like these kind of graphics potentially make their way to our home consoles is kind of like what we've been waiting for, but since the gen started, where we had all these promises about ray tracing and this and that, and none of it really came to fruition because, I suppose the pandemic happened and maybe cross gen lasted longer than anyone was potentially expecting. But it does feel like this year with games like Resident Evil, Diablo as well has these kind of like absolutely mind blowing cinematics. And it kind of feels like the gen, maybe in a way, is actually officially starting now with this Hellblade demo. But yeah, I'm pretty excited to see this tech come to life. And but man, I really need to see some gameplay. I really need to see how this game plays before I can truly get excited about it.
I've talked about this before, and you and I have talked about this. The reveal trailer is one of the most hype reveal trailers of all time. I have never been more stoked about the way a game was presented. I've never rewatched a trailer that many times. Like that, I just got goosebumps every single time I watched that trailer. I love the narrative. I love the focus on touching on just the dark and scary reality of the human brain that Hellblade 2 or Hellblade 1 focuses on. The fact that, despite everything, sometimes you can't control your brain. And that's a horrifying thought. That is one of the scariest things to comprehend. And they managed to manifest that into a video game in a really powerful way. So I'm excited to see Ninja Theory get a budget to really expand upon that and really blow it up. And as we've seen with this demo and as we've seen with everything they're doing, they want to make sure this hits. I agree that we need to see more gameplay to see how it's going to feel, because the feeling of a game is going to be really important. And if it is just very cinematic, that'll be cool, but it maybe won't necessarily be fun. And I would love to be in a world where it's both. It is this powerful narrative with great gameplay that's engaging and fun. And we haven't seen a lot in the gameplay department. But this showcase, makes me feel like at the very least, it's going to be an absolute visual feast on both PC and console. I also have to have a quick aside here because I got to give myself a pat on the back, and I got to give myself credit here, all right? Because I made a new meme reaction image, Jez. I made a new meme reaction image this week. So the little end sequence where you see Senua smirk, captured that, brightened it up, cropped it, drew it, slapped it on Twitter and said, hey, me excited about X, Y, and Z. And then it blew up, and we had Aaron Greenberg take it. We had the official Xbox account use it as well. So a meme was born, and I'm taking credit for it right here, right now, all right? Because I called Rand out because he reshared it. I'm like, bro, what? You hit save on the image, but you couldn't even like my tweet? And he's like, bro, I got this from somewhere else. And I was like, whoa, hold up now. If this is blowing up, I need a little credit, all right? I need just a sprinkle of credit.
Well, to be fair, he did give you credit on Xbox 2 because we did talk about it.
Okay.
He did say you made it. Whew. And it reminded me of another, this is not the first time Windows Central alumni has created an Xbox meme and not been credited for it.
Because what else have they stolen?
Yeah, you may or may not remember that Matt Brown created the original Xbox fridge meme.
Oh, damn.
And that went on and became a whole ass product, and Matt never got any credit for it whatsoever.
Where's the royalties, Xbox?
Yeah, I know, right?
Come on! Wow.
They didn't even send him a fridge.
I forgot that Matt was the OG. Matt Brown was the original Xbox fridge meme.
He was, yeah. didn't even send him a fridge, and meanwhile they're sending influencers like I just seen like a whole ass real Xbox fridge, and like they didn't even send Matt a mini fridge.
I mean, I gotta say, some people on the Xbox team liked my original tweet, and they still didn't even, tag me. So a little hurt, little hurt, but such is life. A meme was born, and the world is better with a new meme. So appreciate that. I'm gonna get some super chats here because, my God, y'all killing it. We got Yo Donnie gifting 5 channel memberships. Hot diggity, damn! Boys dropping major support. So huge shout out to Yodani. Huge shout out to all the new channel members. Huge shout out to the people watching. If you're new, if you're not subscribed to the channel, yeah, it's a fairly newer thing I'm doing over here. So appreciate anybody who wants to subscribe, show some support. JD Gamer says, ABK deal adjacent. What do you guys think after the recent remarks of Senator Maria Cantwell about Sony competing on an unfair playing field in Japan and what it could mean for Sony in the future? Might Sony have caused trouble? We are going to touch on that. I promise. That is part of the ABK segment. We will be touching that exact point. And then by trouble, just to clarify, another super chat from JD Gamer says, by trouble, I mean, could Sony have shined a light on the video game industry and monopolies that have end up regretting themselves? After calling Microsoft a monopoly in the video game industry is ridiculous. Yes, we're going to be talking all about that.
Yeah, it's man, it's really funny how this has all backfired for Sony in a way.
It's just it's been beautiful. It's, again, a lot of Xbox fans have been just relishing in it. They've been a little messy regarding the whole thing, but rightfully so. We've had to endure. Again, there's one thing I don't care about at all, and I don't feel any sympathy ever, and that's a billion-dollar companies whining about them making less money. I don't, whether it's Xbox, whether it's PlayStation, if you're a billion-dollar company complaining about less money, I don't care. I don't want to hear it. Don't try to make anyone feel bad. And no one in their right mind should feel bad about Xbox or PlayStation making less money. JD Gamer again says Sony, though, with its dominant market position and their use of it, might actually be touching the line of what a monopoly is, especially the way Sony protects itself from actually competing fairly. Yeah, you're bringing up great points, JD. Appreciate you bringing up amazing points. Jez, real quick, Spider-Man versus Starfield. There's been some developments this week, courtesy of Tony Todd, the voice actor of Venom in Spider-Man 2 and the legendary animated series. He pulled a Norman Reedus, guys. He went on Twitter and said something he probably shouldn't have said, and he's been backpedaling hard ever since. But he casually came out and said that, oh yeah, Spider-Man 2, PlayStation's biggest game of the year, might be dropping in September with a marketing rollout in August. And then there's a bunch of weird videos of him in a jacuzzi hiding in the water saying, don't believe me, I'm just an idiot. I'm jet lagged. Don't listen to me. It's not happening. Whoa. And so it's been funny to watch this all unfold. But a conversation that spawned because of this is we have Spider-Man 2, which is PlayStation's biggest game of the year, and Starfield, which is Xbox's biggest game of the year, now potentially launching in the same month. So, Jez, real quick, will Starfield and Spider-Man 2 be going head-to-head, and does it matter? Hypothetically, if both games come out on the same day for whatever godforsaken reason, does it matter?
It doesn't matter, because, Starfield is a long tail game. This is a game that's going to have a massive 10-year development cycle. It's going to have tons of content added to it. They're going to have this whole modding platform, I think, with user-generated content. The reason they've made this massive universe with procedurally generated planets is because they want modders to fill those planets in. And then they want those modders to sell them for money. And then they, make an entire business model out of user-generated content around the game. They haven't talked about any of that stuff yet. But I just feel it in my bones that that's going to be a big play. It's not a leak. That's just my pure speculation based on the way the industry's been going over the last few years. You got Fortnite Creative, you got Roblox, you got Minecraft, all these platforms for user-generated content. Even like Halo Forge, which doesn't let creators make any money, but it's a similar sort of thing that keeps games relevant over time. So even if on day one everyone goes to play Spider-Man instead of Starfield, which ain't going to happen, but if it did happen, it wouldn't matter because, Starfield will still be there. It's still going to be updated and it's still going to be, huge on PC. And, we were comparing figures, like Spider-Man 1 on PC versus Fallout 76 or Fallout 4 or Skyrim. And, you're talking like you're talking about a game with tens of thousands of players versus a game with hundreds of thousands of concurrent players, you know?
Yes.
And even like Fallout 76 has more players than Spider-Man because of the way these games are. They have like huge fan bases, they have ongoing massive amounts of content, and they just kind of don't die. So, thousands of people still play Skyrim to this day, even though it's old as hell, janky as hell, and that's because of mods and all that kind of stuff. However, I will confirm that September is the launch window for Spider-Man. I actually knew that a few weeks ago, but I never posted it because uh, I think I just forgot, to be honest.
Just
So,
oops.
yeah, so
Oh well,
like,
Tony Todd said it, so I guess I can confirm now.
yeah, I don't really cover PlayStation stuff anyway, but yeah, I did hear the September thing. So it was out there, I think, amongst leaker circles or industry circles. So I don't know, it was probably going to get out there eventually via, Insider Gaming or something like that anyway. Um but yeah, it does seem like they're going to go head to head, and it doesn't matter if they do because they're
It-
both going to be great games. But Spider-Man's going to be completed once and probably never play it again, and Starfield's going to be this game that people play for hundreds and hundreds of hours for years and years to come.
yeah,
People have thousands of hours played in Skyrim and stuff.
Starfield's going to have a huge tail. It's just objectively going to be a way bigger game. It's going to take people longer to beat, so therefore they will be playing it longer. There'll be more word of mouth consistently. And so when we look at these conversations, like Tears of the Kingdom, Spider-Man 2, and Starfield will be the three biggest games this year. Like they will be the three biggest games this year. And then anyone who says otherwise isn't really like paying attention to the history and the weight of these IP. I don't think Spider-Man 2 is going to launch the same day as Starfield because, again, what a lot of publishers realize is no matter how big you think you are, you want some kind of space between big games. Because let's say, hypothetically, there's a Starfield fan and a Spider-Man fan, because I think there is a lot of, intersection between people who are excited about Spider-Man 2 and people who are excited about Starfield. I think there's a genuine intersect. And so if you launch both games on the same day, the number of people who will buy both will dramatically decrease. Just factually. There is no way financially that everyone can drop $140 on the same day for two games. And so people are going to wait. And then sometimes that wait turns into someone not buying it at all. So I think we'll at least see a week or two between these. I think now that we know Starfield's release date, Spider-Man or Insomniac can say, okay, cool, we'll be the next week or the week after, still hit that September window, but not have this scenario where two massive games are dropping on the same day. And I think that's realistic. And I think more big publishers need to just accept that, as much as your game is going to have weight, people only have so much time and money, and you're going to lose sales if you try to compete with Starfield day and date.
Yeah. I think the ideal scenario is that Spider-Man launches a week or two before, and then people can get that out of their system, and then
do it. Get that out of blast through it, and then prepare them bodies for Starfield, y'all. A couple super chats. Patrick says, member for 1 month. Oh, sorry. Patrick, who's been a member for 1 month, says, have to catch the replay later. Keep doing your thing, Miles. You're killing it. Jez, you're all right too. Have a good weekend, everyone. Appreciate you, Patrick. Patrick says, Jez, insert Jez facepalm JPEG. Oh, correcting a super chat. Appreciate you. Okay, JD Gamer, again, okay, I just can't help it with acquisition talk. Who do you guys think Microsoft acquires after the ABK deal closes? I think IO Interactive, Cryotech, Certain Affinity, Sega, Mistwalker, Level 5, Platinum Games. JD, hold on. Hang in there, bro. We're gonna touch on it. El Greco says, hi, I like the show, and you two are cool. Appreciate you. Appreciate the kind words. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out. Okay, Hargeet Chani with a super chat that says the senator speaking in Japan might be a hint about the next acquisition for Microsoft. Perhaps someone in Japan. Jez, they're hungry for acquisition talk, so let's dive into it here. Let's transition into the ABK deal. It's been a meme on the show. It's been a meme on every Xbox podcast that we're all a little sick and tired of talking about the ABK deal. Been going on for a while. It's been a roller coaster of drama. There's been ups, there's been downs, there's been uncertainty. But there's some light, Jez. There's some light at the end of the tunnel this week, and I want to talk about it because the CMA, who's notably been the biggest standout and the biggest opposer of this proposed acquisition, they have released some findings this week. And they have essentially come out and said that, hold on, where is it? Where is it here? They have provisionally concluded that the acquisition of Activision Blizzard will not result in a substantial lessening of competition in console gaming services. So, like we talked about earlier, I think there was a learning curve for all of these regulatory bodies, because this was the first time that the gaming industry has been brought to this table in this way, and there was a learning curve. And again, I use this word and I don't mean it as an insult in any way, because it's not an insult fundamentally. A lot of them were ignorant to how this all works, how the games industry works, how subscription services work, blah, blah, blah. So they had to get up to speed. And there were concerns when you look at it fundamentally, when you have people like Jim Ryan saying, hey, this is bad because X, Y, and Z. If you don't know, you look at that and say, oh, damn, maybe this is bad. We need to look into it. So the CMA, they have looked into it, and they have said that this isn't going to hurt Call of Duty because it doesn't seem like Xbox has any plans to take Call of Duty away from PlayStation. So, Jez, how are you feeling about the state of the deal now? Because I know you've been up and down. I've seen you say, I'm uncertain about this deal going through. I think it might get blocked. I'm unsure. Now we have this. Where are you at? I know it's been a roller coaster, but where are you at right now with this deal?
I think it's going through for sure now. Like it all hinged on my thoughts were all revolved around how stupid the UK establishment is. Like for the last 15 years, the IQ of the UK has been bottoming out across the board. They've been making so many dumb policies and so many dumb regulatory decisions. Objectively speaking, this isn't political. This is just purely based on the facts, the state of the country, the economy, and all that kind of stuff. So, they ignore experts is what the UK establishment does. They ignore experts aggressively. They even resent experts. It's like experts, nah.
I'm the expert here, okay?
I'm the expert here. Yeah, exactly. So they actively reject things that don't fit into a narrative that they've decided for themselves. And it's important to note that the CMA is independent of the government, but it's still part of that whole, governmental regulatory community sphere, legislative, whatever. But there's a lot of, we're going to get into some of the geopolitics about the deal in a minute because, the whole Japan angle right now.
Yes.
But there is a geopolitical angle here, right, with regard to the UK and its status in the world. The UK is a degraded state. It used to be a really important player in the world, militarily, technologically, and all that kind of stuff. And these days, it's just not. It's waned in every aspect, notwithstanding Brexit, for various other reasons why, right? And as part of this current government's pledge to get the UK relevant again, one of the things they want to do is take advantage of the fact we're no longer in the EU to have this sort of deregulated tech haven economy. This is something the government's been open about doing, and they want it to be the Silicon Valley of Europe is what the government has said. And Bobby Kotick, in an interview with I think it was it ABC or CNBC, something like that, one of the American outlets, we covered it anyway. He called out the British Prime Minister directly and said, you guys want to be seen as a tech powerhouse and you can't even grasp something as simple as the console industry. He said you won't be a Silicon Valley for investment, you'll be a Death Valley. Is what he said. And he was right. As much of a interesting kind of person Bobby Kotick is, he was absolutely right on this point that it wasn't a good look for the British government. That they were being so dumb about this deal, in their early findings, and so blatantly dumb. The math just didn't add up, and and all that kind of stuff. And it kind of feels like it was because they're operating on a common sense narrative. The provision in the UK regulatory framework, provision 1 is almost okay, what's the common sense argument here? And because Sony has just a huge mindshare in the UK, it's the nostalgia platform. Nobody has nostalgia for Xbox in the UK. even as big as Xbox is in the UK, it's still not the nostalgia platform. That is PlayStation. You know, I know a lot of Americans have like this sort of epic nostalgia for Halo and stuff.
Yeah, brother, that's the America machine.
Exactly, it's the American machine, but it's just not like that in the UK.
I bleed green, brother.
Exactly, that kind of stuff. But it just never had that kind of mind share in the UK. So of course, if you are a dumb, regulator and you don't really know much about gaming beyond maybe what your kids say, and all the kids in the playground, like, they don't want Xboxes, they all want PlayStation. Like, Xbox is uncool as hell in the UK. No kid
Aww.
actively wants an Xbox.
A kid gets an Xbox for Christmas in UK and says, "This ain't a PS5."
Yeah, seriously, like, it's you get bullied in the playground if you got Xbox.
You're an Xbox player?
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's the poor kid console.
I mean, even
Xbox Series X,
even in the
you can't
US,
afford a PS5. Yeah.
PlayStation has that brand power. A quick little aside for me, a quick story from my personal life. When I was living in Colorado, we had a maintenance person come by our place to check on some stuff, and he looked at my setup and he was all excited about the setup in my office. And I have this chair. It has the Xbox. It's the Maxnomic Xbox chair. And so he's all excited about my gaming setup because he's like a streamer and stuff. And then he sees the Xbox chair and he says, "Oh, you play on Xbox?" And I was like, "Whoa, bro, you're bringing console wars into my home? Come on, man."
Oh, man.
It was just such a funny situation.
Hilarious.
And then I saw his truck outside and he had the PlayStation sticker, like huge PlayStation sticker on his truck. And I was like, man, people go all out on that.
Damn, that's serious business, but
it's serious. But yeah, so this whole
what it's like, man.
Yeah, this whole deal, it's been, obviously heated for people who are invested in one console side or the other. But I agree with you. I think we are getting close to a resolution. CMA was that was the one that I thought for sure would be like the biggest hurdle. And now it's coming down to basically the FTC. And the FTC has concerns as well. But I think those are going to be addressed. That's Microsoft's home country. They have people going out there constantly to say like, hey, this is what it looks like. Don't worry because X, Y, Z. And I think Microsoft has a lot of the answers that they're looking for. So at this point, with the CMA on board, I think we are getting close to a conclusion here, of some kind. But there's been some other kind of, I guess, drama, if you will, this week. Because as some people in the folks mentioned in Super Chat, there's a trade talk in between the U.S. and Japan last week. And a U.S. senator officially questioned PlayStation's monopoly in Japan. This comes from Windows Central. Okay, so the United States and Japan are currently in talks to expand the cooperation in various areas. One of those areas is trade, and during a Senate trade hearing, Washington Senator Maria Cantwell raised the issue of competition between Xbox and PlayStation in the region. Using the FTC's high-end console designation, she referred to the fact that Microsoft only has a 2% share when compared to PlayStation's 98%, criticizing trade commissioners for having allowed the, quote, monopoly to occur. So a U.S. senator has said that PlayStation actually has a monopoly in Japan. So important point of clarification. The FTC's high-end designation conveniently omits the Nintendo Switch, which is the dominant console and platform in that region. If you look at Japan and you ignore Nintendo Switch in the gaming space, that's not an accurate representation of gaming in Japan at all. But
no.
FTC is the one who has said that the high-end market, quote unquote, is Xbox and PlayStation. So, how did you feel about hearing a U.S. senator speaking with Japan directly, basically use PlayStation's argument of monopoly against PlayStation in this situation?
I just thought it was just hilariously ironic, because this whole high-end console designation, like the article says, is just not reality. To suggest that Xbox, PlayStation don't compete with Nintendo is just absurd. It's like saying, okay, I can play on my Xbox and my Nintendo at the same time. Can I actually do that? Am I going to buy Diablo 3 and Diablo on Xbox as both platforms? I mean, I have, but most people
yeah.
won't do that. Yeah, but yeah, most people aren't going to do that. They're going to compete. They're going to play on one platform or the other. Like for a lot of games, a lot of indie games, especially like Nintendo Switch. a lot of indie developers out there have said like, yeah, our sales on Switch are absolutely crazy, because they don't have to compete with some of the big AAAs, you know. But that forecloses Xbox and PlayStation for like indie games. So, you know, to say they don't compete is absolutely asinine, and that's exactly, you know, the kind of you know, narrative that only really works on the surface in Sony's favor, because they can say, well, it doesn't count about Nintendo not having Call of Duty because they're not in the high-end console market. It's like, yeah, come on.
Yeah, because PlayStation doesn't want to look at Nintendo, who is, let's be real, regardless of how you feel about the console and the games, wildly successful. They've had a huge, I mean, they've been huge, but the Switch has been a powerhouse. It's been arguably the dominating console of the last several years. It's been a huge runaway success. So to ignore that in conversations about competition and being unable to compete in the games industry is just, it's like you said, it's asinine. It's absolutely ridiculous to ignore Nintendo, regardless of like some arbitrary price tag. Oh, their console's cheaper. Then that means that it doesn't count. It does, because their console's cheaper.
Yeah, does that mean the Series S doesn't count then? So like Sony saying the Series S doesn't compete with PlayStation?
Yeah, they're the same
Series
price.
S, not the high-end console business?
No.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. But in any case, it seems like Microsoft's very cleverly turning this in on itself now, because it was created out of thin air and it doesn't make any sense. So now you've got like you've got firms, you've got Microsoft and other companies, you know, drawing attention to the fact that this designation, the high-end console designation, doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
And they're using that lack of sense to their advantage in discussions about PlayStation's business in other markets. They use this high-end console designation in the EU, where they were talking about Sony's market share in Europe, which is 80 to 20%. And then in the same breath, Brad Smith talked about how in Japan it's 98% to 2% high-end console designation that Sony and the FTC created to omit Nintendo from the argument, something they thought was going to be to their advantage. But now it's looking like, yeah, it's looking like an own goal. It's looking like it's backfiring spectacularly, because now you've got senators using that same designation in their discussions in trade disputes with other nations, which is like the extra, you know, geopolitical angle to this. And like I was speculating earlier potentially that, you know, maybe the British government got involved in the regulatory stuff, because again, the facts don't back up what Sony have said. They didn't back up what Sony said in the UK. And you know, when you start looking at the facts, you start getting into these other questions, like why is Xbox so behind in Japan? You know, and I've seen people criticize the senator for this, because a lot of her funding, campaign funding, appears on the surface to come from Microsoft.
That's
and
an
I've
important
seen people,
note. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people use this as a gotcha, you know, like gotcha, she's paid for by Microsoft. However, when you actually look at these, you know, so-called donations, that is represented by the employees of Microsoft, right? It's not Microsoft corporate donations. It's just individuals who exercise their democratic right to donate to a politician, right? And it just so happens that Microsoft is one of the biggest employers in Washington State. So it looks like on paper that Microsoft is sending all this money to this senator, you know, to pay her off and make her corrupt or whatever. But in reality, isn't this how democracy is supposed to work? Where a senator is supposed to represent the interests of her constituents?
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, if you like, the way it works in the United States is that if you have someone that you believe in, that you there's a lot of donations for the campaign, that you believe in this candidate, you want them to represent you, so you donate to their campaign, you give them money so that they have a better chance of getting their voice out there and being heard. And so that's like a huge part of American politics, is donations from the individuals to senators, to politicians, to make sure that they are the representative for that region. So again, she's from Washington, so it makes sense that a lot of, you know, potential Microsoft employees, because let's be real, they just announced they're laying off 11,000 people, and that was only less than 5% of their workforce. So do the math. That's a lot of people who could potentially give money to this particular senator.
Yeah. And also, that figure that people were throwing around, it wasn't corporate donations. It was individuals who were employed by Microsoft Microsoft's one of the biggest employers in the Washington state, so of course they're going to be one of the biggest companies ending up directing their money towards that candidate by default. But also, it was over the last 30 years. So it's kind of like, yeah, so these people have been donating to this senator for 30 years preemptively to bribe her to make these arguments about the ABK deal. It's like, bro, make it make sense, please. You know, it's
She's playing the long game, Jez. She's been in it for
she's
30
playing
years waiting for this moment, her chance
this
to
moment.
strike.
This moment. So again, like facts are hard when you're sort of dealing with the console war, apparently. But
And that's why we've seen folks like Brad Smith and Lulu Chang come out and basically say, like, yeah, now that the facts are coming to light, now that the reality of the business and the industry is coming to light, it's becoming more and more clear to these regulators that, okay, no, this isn't the problem that we were told it would be. This doesn't seem like it's going to be a problem, because they can look at PlayStation objectively and say, okay, PlayStation, you're not going to be hurting after this. You're not hurting right now. You're in a very strong, and in the case of Japan, incredibly dominant position here. What's the problem?
yeah. I mean, the facts are ultimately Nintendo does fine without Call of Duty.
Yep.
So PlayStation shot itself in the foot by making this about Call of Duty, because Nintendo does fine without Call of Duty. The other fact of the matter is PlayStation is absolutely dominant, and the fact that it has a better market share has created a situation of foreclosure for Microsoft, because it doesn't have to pay as much as Microsoft does to get exclusive content. So when it comes to getting exclusives, because Sony's got a bigger market share and devs know they're going to make a lot of money if they're taking an exclusivity deal with Sony, Sony doesn't need to ask for as much.
Yep.
So Microsoft, if they want to get an exclusivity deal, they have to pay more, because they're potentially going to lose the devs are going to lose sales, so they have to compensate the dev for that lost sale, that lost market share, and that lost mind share. So they are in a anti-competitive situation potentially, you know, and this deal will create a more of a level playing field, I think. Like, but yeah, it's like when you actually start digging into the facts of the matter and start ignoring the common sense narrative of Microsoft is this huge evil company and poor Sony, you know, and stuff like this. When you actually start digging into it, it's like, oh, actually, maybe Sony's the one that needs to be looked at a little bit here.
Yeah.
Because they do have an advantage. And, you know, they've earned that advantage. It's not like they bought their way to the top or bribed their way to the top. And yeah, they have bought studios, but they've earned that advantage. You know, they earned it in the 90s when they developed the best video game console of that time.
When they stepped into the Thunderdome to compete with Nintendo at the time.
Yeah, they did. Sony earned it. This is not detracting from the achievements that Sony has, you know, accomplished over the decades, and what the benefits they've brought to the industry and the mainstreaming of gaming that they've been part of. You know, none of that is to deny that fact. It's all just business, you know. And like sometimes when I'm discussing the business stuff, people are like, "Oh my god, you're attacking Sony." It's like, dude, no, this is just the business reality of things, you know. I don't begrudge Sony for doing anything that it does, because it's all business and they're doing a damn good job of it. If I was running Sony, I'd do the same thing, you know, because it'd be my job. It would be my job, and it's Jim Ryan's job to do all this stuff, and he does a damn good job of it. You know, fair play to him. You know, so none of it's denigrating Sony. None of it's an attack on Sony. It's just the reality of the matter. But also, that reality is catching up to Sony now when it comes to regulatory arguments, and I think Sony should have just stayed out of this.
Yeah,
you know,
because
you've seen Apple stay out of this, because similarly, right? Apple has stayed out of this, and you know that Apple has stayed out of this because Apple knows that if it gets involved, they're going to be looked at from a regulatory perspective, and they do not want to be looked at from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah, they don't want their dirty laundry aired, and that's what PlayStation is doing here by being so loud. But again, like you said, Jim Ryan's out here. They're looking at Call of Duty, and the reason that they're looking at Call of Duty so hard is because they get so much free money every single year from Call of Duty sales. They're the dominant console platform, more people buy Call of Duty on PlayStation. And sure, they do spend millions of dollars on marketing. That is an important note. That PlayStation, from what I understand, they do a marketing match, which is something that I'm unsure if Xbox does, but they do 1-to-1 in a lot of cases for marketing dollars. So they spend millions and millions of dollars advertising with their partners, and that's one of the perks of collaborating with PlayStation is you get not only that brand association, but you get a lot of money thrown your way from marketing as well. And so outside of the marketing, all they need to do is kick back and take that 30% cut every single year. All those microtransactions, the raw game sales, they're not developing that. They're not paying for the development of that game. They're kicking back and getting a staggering amount of money every single year, year over year. And when there's a potential for that to go away, and you don't have an immediate fill, like they don't have a ongoing game that can fill that gap right now. They have Destiny in some ways. They're working on a few more to fill those gaps, but you want to drag that out and you want to push that moment back as far as you possibly can. And that's why they're being so loud and annoying about Call of Duty, because it is essentially money for nothing for them. And it's a lot of money for them.
Which thing is, right, it's Microsoft doesn't want to be a monopoly, right? Because oftentimes being a monopoly is not always a great thing, because you do end up starting getting all these regulatory measures thrown at you. Like Windows, for example, is losing a ton of money. Like, I mean, it's still huge, of course it is. It's still like a multi-billion-dollar business. But Windows has become smaller than Xbox now because the licensing model. Yeah,
really?
Windows is smaller revenue than Xbox now. I think or it's very close to being overtaken by Xbox.
Damn, that's a staggering figure. That was their bread and butter, baby. They were trying to put Microsoft Word and Office on Xbox because that was their bread and butter for a long time. But
Office is separate, right?
Yeah,
so like this doesn't include Office. This is just purely what they make from Windows, which is selling Windows licenses and licensing Windows to OEMs who make laptops. So like when you buy a laptop, the OEM basically buys the Windows license and attaches it to their laptop, and they maybe pass the cost on to consumers. But that's one way Microsoft has historically made money on Windows. But the fact that they've got a monopoly means that they can't do some of the stuff that other platform holders do to make money. So like the 30% cut, for example. When you put a game on Xbox on Windows, you don't have to pay Microsoft any money. I mean, if you use the Microsoft Store, then you have to pay a small cut. But the thing is, there's so few people using the Microsoft Store that Microsoft basically takes no money whatsoever from it because everyone's on Steam. You know? So, and Microsoft there won't ever be a scenario where Microsoft can just, sit up and be like, okay, every app developer in the world who wants to make something for Windows, they now have to pay us 30%, which is how Apple operates with iOS and iPad. Microsoft could never do that because regulators have just become like, hang on a sec.
Whoa.
You guys, what are you guys doing? You can't do this. So that's what happens when you're a monopoly. Like some of your options sort of start peeling back, And there was the whole antitrust thing in the late 90s and early 2000s where regulators were like, okay, you've got a monopoly in Windows, which means you're not allowed to have a monopoly in search, which means like when you open Windows now, we're going to force you to offer people a choice of browser and also offer people a choice of search engine. And that's why Google Chrome is now the dominant browser, because like on Windows XP, you had that pop-up where it's like, which browser do you want to install? Because Microsoft had a monopoly, So I think like some of this stuff is just such short-term thinking by Sony, because if Sony did end up with a console monopoly and stuff, where it was like they had like, I don't know, 92% market share across the whole world or something, or 98% market share, then you're gonna have regulators saying, okay, well, if you've got this massive market share, then you're no longer allowed to charge devs 30%. You've got to be more like Windows. And also you've got to offer the opportunity for other stores on your platform, because now we're forcing you to be an open platform. So like sometimes there can be downsides to being a monopoly,
Sometimes it's convenient to be in third place,
Yeah, I mean, so like Apple and Google have really benefited from being a duopoly because they compete against each other, which is why regulators have allowed them to have this really massive 30% cut. But even now, like regulators are looking at Apple's increasing dominance and like because Google doesn't make a lot of money from Android because there's no hardware play there. But Apple's double dipping. They make a load of money from the hardware and then make a load of money from the developers who paying that 30% cut. And like a lot of regulators across the world are already gearing up to force Apple to allow third-party app stores, which is something Google already does, because they want to, bring some of that competition and innovation to the industry. Like the mobile industry is very, very difficult to innovate in because Apple and Google, they only allow for one business model, which is, pay to win gambling stuff. Basically, is the only way you can make money on mobile, which hurts innovation, hurts art, and it hurts culture. So, I think this was just sort of a really long roundabout way of saying um, you know, I kind of wish Sony would be a little bit more long-term thinking about all this stuff because they could work with Microsoft on building a cloud. They should be working with Microsoft to take advantage of the regulation that's coming in the App Store for iOS and Android. They could have like a PlayStation Plus cloud service with God of War, Spider-Man, all this shit ready to go day one when the EU finally tells Apple you have to allow third-party mobile game stores on your store or we're gonna fine you every day millions of dollars. And that is coming, and Microsoft smelled that
Yeah,
regulatory change, and that's why Microsoft is out here saying we're gonna build our own mobile gaming
it's
store,
coming,
right?
baby. Yeah,
It's coming, and
again.
they're there to take advantage. And where's Sony? Nowhere. Sony's
Yeah.
nowhere. They're fighting over Call of Duty. They're fighting over keeping things the way it was since the PS3 generation. They don't want any change, and I think that's the you know the big the biggest criticism I could leverage at Jim Ryan is that he just doesn't want to think about the future. So,
Yeah,
oh well.
change is coming, whether you want or not. You bring up a lot of excellent points about the state of the industry, the weight of being a quote monopoly, and how to navigate those waters, and how in this day and age, extreme dominance. Historically, that's what you wanted as a business, but in this day and age, that comes at extreme price that makes it almost not worth it. In this day
Yeah.
and age, it's in your best interest to have somebody who's standing toe to toe to you, standing toe to toe with you,
Yeah.
and I
Think
think.
think Yeah, think how much more money Windows would be making, right? If they had instead of having 90% market share or whatever they've got, if they had say 60% market share, but they could also force a 30% fee, they'd be
Yeah.
making way more money than they're
Oh, they'd
making
be
right now.
swimming. I mean, they're a trillion-dollar company, so they're already doing just
Yeah,
fine. But that would boost the numbers significantly in a huge way.
yeah,
But they've dealt with the heat in the past. They've dealt with that monopoly conversation in a legitimate way, because when we looked at Windows early and we looked at the PC landscape for a long time, yeah, they were probably the epitome of what a monopoly could be in terms of competition, because nobody could stand toe to toe and deal with what they had. They had too much power, too much weight, too much influence. And so the conversation's a lot different when we look at Xbox. A lot
yeah.
different. Jez, we got 314 people rocking with us on this beautiful Saturday. Appreciate all of you. If you are enjoying the show, hit that like button, share it out. I'm gonna get to some super chats, and we got two more topics. Xbox mascots. That's a fun one, Jess. I want to get your pick. Once this deal closes, I want to pick the 5 mascots for Xbox, and I want you to be the person to do that with me. But first, we had some people asking about, who's next. But I want to get to a couple more super chats as we rope in our final talking points on the ABK deal. So JD Gamer agrees with Hargeet Chani about the PlayStation monopoly. I agree, and I don't think their plan is to only pick up one publisher. And I think they want more than that. I think Sega is at the top in regards to who Xbox might acquire from Japan. Randy G says, don't forget about the real game of the year, Diablo IV. Jez, do you think they do it? You think they secure game of the year?
I think it's highly possible. I
I will say competition this year is going to be fierce.
I don't think Hogwarts Legacy wins.
No.
You gotta remember who's voting for these awards. It's game journalists.
And you got to remember what else is out there. You had Metroid Prime reviewed way better. You had Resident Evil 4 Remake reviewed way better. Dead Space Remake reviewed way better. We have We have Starfield on the horizon. We have Redfall on the horizon. We have Spider-Man 2 on the horizon. You know, regardless of how you feel about Hogwarts Legacy, and I think it was a great game. Fundamentally, I think it delivered what a lot of people wanted from a Hogwarts RPG. The competition is out of control this year. um,
Mm.
JD Gamer says, I think Spider-Man needs to launch before, like Jez said, because if it's after, then I think Spider-Man suffers greatly. I think suffers greatly is an exaggeration. But like I said, no one game will suffer. As we've seen, no matter how great your game is. I'm sorry, Horizon. I don't like to use you as the example, but you are the definitive example of games that review incredibly well, that people love, that have their sales hampered by games that are way bigger. And it sucks for that team, but that's the reality. Mighty Mork says, Dumper and Beans, the GOATs. First time live for me. Appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate you showing some support. Appreciate you dropping a super chat. Nick W says, oh, okay. Sony should bring back Resistance or SOCOM. If they did, they wouldn't need a Call of Duty. There you go. If you want to compete, compete. All right. That's in the famous words of Satya Nadella.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, I think like this Last of Us service game they're developing. What is it? Factions or something?
That's the rumored name or code name. Factions.
That is that's going to be, if they nail that, that could be huge because of the hype from the TV show and stuff. They've
Oh,
really mainstreamed Last of Us now.
the sales of the game. I keep getting PR blasts, like emails, like, "Hey, sales of The Last of Us have increased 700% since The Last of Us aired," and like, yeah, that game is getting a huge resurgence. So if they can time it just right, if they can use that multimedia push and get Last of Us factions out in a big way, that could be huge. If it is a fun like Escape from Tarkov, like not quite a battle royale, but in that vein multiplayer game, that has the potential to be a big hit and a big moneymaker, which is what Sony wants. Super chat from Game Seeker, just the pair giving a thumbs up. Appreciate you. Okay, Jez, let's talk about who's next real quick. This is a burning question as we look at the future of the industry, as we look at Xbox's plans, as we look at Xbox's previous comments about, we ain't done. We ain't done after this. Who's next, Jez? Let's just give me two realistic picks. We'll both pick two realistic picks from here after the ABK deal goes through.
Man, it's hard to say, man. It's really hard to say. Like, there's studios that I would want them to pick, but I think like there's a couple of studios they have to pick. One of them is Creative Assembly.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
Certain Affinity.
I was going to say,
Affinity,
yeah,
sorry.
Certain Affinity. Yes.
I get them mixed up every single time.
Yeah,
But
they're
Certain
huge
Affinity,
for Xbox right now. They're a pillar of
Yeah.
Xbox right now.
They're a pillar of Xbox. They've been developing Halo Infinite, saving it from obscurity, developing the multiplayer, building Project Tatanka, which, sounds like it's becoming its own beast. Maybe even spinning off from Halo Infinite itself into its own client.
Yeah.
Really interested about what they're doing with that one.
Let's go,
But
baby.
they need to lock that studio down, because if Tencent comes in and and then it's too late, then it's going to be GG. You're going to really screw yourselves over if you don't pick up that studio.
Put a ring on it, all right?
Put a ring on it.
Make
Yeah,
that make
exactly.
that official. Make that Facebook official, all right?
Yeah, exactly. But so there's Certain Affinity. There's also other studios that probably make a lot of sense for them, like IO Interactive. The rumor is that Project Fantasy was an Xbox exclusive, like, but now,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like I thought it was originally called Project Dragon, from what I understand. I think they changed the code name because the code name leaked by themselves. By the way, they leaked it, not me. They posted Project Dragon in their job listings on the IO Interactive website, which yeah, exactly. So it wasn't, they might be mad at me, if maybe they are, I don't know, but they're the ones, they leaked their code name first, not me. So there was that whole deal with Project Dragon, and then but the thing that might have been wrong was this idea that it was going to be exclusive, because one of the things that I saw a document which is basically a description of the game they were pitching, and it was like, yeah, it's going to be, the game we're pitching would be coming to Xbox and PC, and it would have Azure integration and servers and service and all this kind of stuff, and we need Microsoft's partnership to make that reality. it just seemed like, okay, well, this is done and dusted. This is an Xbox exclusive. But like since then, it's kind of been like, was this actually a signed deal or was it just a pitch? You know, maybe it was a pitch that Microsoft didn't want. You
They were
know,
looking for
um,
partners, and Microsoft was maybe number one on their list for getting this thing done.
yeah. I mean, if you're building a service game, the obvious person you want to partner with is Microsoft. You know, but maybe because they haven't announced any platforms for Project Fantasy, now it's like the jury's. It's hard to say whether it is exclusive or not. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe they're just. 'Cause I heard as well that a reason they might have posted that thing was because it was gonna leak or something. And they want to start hiring. I
Yeah.
don't know. But I don't know. It's just a bit of it's speculation, but I think like IO Interactive would be a good pick. Like Hitman's a great IP. If Microsoft wants to become a more character-driven studio where people are engaged with the characters they've got in addition to like the platform itself, I mean, who better than Agent 47? Is it? Yeah, he's like
Yeah.
kind of iconic, right? So there's that. But as far as publishers go, it's got to be a Japanese one. It's got to be a Japanese publisher. Has to be the thing that Microsoft's thinking about because Japan is the market where they are absolutely non-existent in, and Japan has become so important recently. Like
Mhm.
Japan's had like a full-blown renaissance for game development. Capcom's on fire. You got FromSoft literally leading the industry in terms of
Winning more game awards than really anyone has. Like, they are
yeah,
absolutely on fire. So
they're on fire.
a lot of
They're
the
on fire.
biggest
Like
game developers and publishers right now are from Japan, like in terms of industry reception, not necessarily raw sales, because again, Activision, Blizzard, and Call of Duty is probably that. But
yeah. Um, so it's becoming crucially important, but it's also like crucially important from a mobile gaming perspective because like Microsoft's strategy is to reach 2 billion gamers, and they
Mhm.
are absolutely laser focused on this, strategy. They're not going to give it up. They're going to keep going for it. Like even if they ABK, I spoke to people in Brussels at Microsoft about this, and I was like, "Well, what's your plan B? You know, is it give up?" And they were like, "Nah." Like
ah,
they're basically saying ABK accelerates the vision, but it's not the whole vision. We can achieve the vision without ABK, is basically what I was told. So like
the vision is not contingent on ABK. Again, it would
yeah,
be when you launch an app store. If you say, "Hey, we have Diablo Immortal and we have Call of Duty Mobile," that's in a compelling app store instantly.
yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like what other you have to think of it in terms of what other studios accelerate that vision when you think about what Microsoft said here. Like one of the studios that accelerates that vision is probably Sega. Sega's got like a large mobile presence. They've got a lot of mobile
Yeah,
games that are
they
pretty
have brand
big.
power in Japan. Sonic is huge. A huge.
Sonic is huge, but they've got Yakuza as well. Persona is very big in Japan, but they're also really big in the West. Like I don't know how big it is in America, but Football Manager is absolutely massive in Europe. Um, and it's also a really big mobile game as well now. So there's that angle, and also you got Relic, who are your StarCraft and your
Yeah, yeah.
Age of Empires studio, because right now they don't have a studio for StarCraft or Age of Empires. So kind of need one of those. So like Sega's a good strategic option for them, I would think.
I think a lot
Um,
of people are on board with you with Sega. That's one you see a lot. There's a lot of brand history. Xbox leaned into Sega heavily with the launch of the original Xbox, because they're coming off the back of the Dreamcast not doing well, and they still wanted to be a player in the space. So a lot of the history of Xbox is tied to Sega in a lot of ways.
yes. So, you have to also think with this senator sharing Microsoft talking points of this 98% market share, you have to wonder if they aren't laying the regular, the political groundwork to try and be
Hmm.
to start talking to Japan and being like, well, you want to do a big trade deal with us, but you won't let us acquire a Japanese studio. And if you want to create a more level playing field in Japan, maybe you should let us buy Sega or buy Capcom.
Ooh.
Conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat.
Tinfoil
Maybe.
hat. Capcom. Okay, Capcom's the pick for me. If I'm Xbox, if I'm Big Papa Phil, if I'm leading the acquisitions team, I'm calling Capcom every single day and saying, "Yo, what's up? What you looking at? How you doing? What's your temp? And right now their temp is piping hot. So they probably don't have a huge incentive to sell because they're doing well. They're paying their employees better because they're doing well. Every single game is hitting from a critical standpoint and from a financial standpoint. So the asking price of Capcom right now is probably very hot. And so it's probably not something that's realistically going to be bought by anyone, but that's someone I'm keeping the conversations going with. Certain Affinity, absolutely agree with you there. That is a just essential, like I said, it's a pillar of Xbox at this point, so you don't want to lose that, again, because you're losing a lot of a big support studio. But what I want to see, and this is just for the spice, this is just for the drama and the controversy, I want to see Xbox buy Square, but I don't even want to see Xbox make them exclusive. What I want is just the big, like, hey, PlayStation, like, PlayStation's been keeping all of these Square games. We saw Final Fantasy brought up. This Final Fantasy 16 exclusivity was brought up recently. I want Xbox to step in and say, hey, you know what, PlayStation? You can have these still. You're still going to get them, but, you know, we want a slice of this, all right? And that means us buying Square. That's what I want to see from this. Because, again, you can't really argue and say that Xbox buying Square is going to hurt competition, especially if they leverage the, hey, we're not going to take it away from you. We'll keep Final Fantasy on your platform. We'll keep Final Fantasy multi-platform, but we need it over here. And if you're not gonna, if there's no other way to get it over here, like, this is our play to do so. Like, that would be a really interesting shakeup in the industry, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Square Enix also solves what their goals are. Because Square Enix has a lot of big mobile presence as well, right?
They do. They do have big. People underestimate Square Enix's mobile games. They talk a lot of, like, people us in the core space, like, clown on Square because a lot of their business decisions are a little bit weird, a little, you know, dated, but they do have kind of a steady stream of somewhat big, especially in Japan, mobile games. And mobile is big in Japan. So if you could kill two birds with one stone, grow your mobile presence and grow your mobile presence in a specific region that you're notably lacking in, that's a good play. That's a smart play.
I mean, the only point to be made about Square Enix is, like, if they did buy Square Enix, they would have essentially a monopoly in subscription-based MMOs. Because then you've got Final Fantasy, Elder Scrolls, and World of Warcraft.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I forgot about Final Fantasy. Yeah, they would be the place. Xbox would be the dominant MMO box.
Yeah, I mean, there's like massive MMOs in Korea and China.
Yeah,
that, you know, we ain't even heard of, really. But like, in terms of raw Western power, you know, Final Fantasy and Warcraft are the two biggest players. You know, World of Warcraft obviously being the biggest, but man, there's a lot they could do. But yeah, I'm not looking forward to this going through this news cycle again.
No, that's why I hope that on the other side we get just a break. Please, nobody else try to buy a big publisher right after this, please. Please, yeah. we need a break, for the love of God, please. Let's just, if you buy a couple studios here and there, PlayStation or Xbox, that's all fine and dandy. But a big publisher, mentally, I'm going to need a break. I'm going to need at least a 6-month break here. So that's what I'm hoping for on the other side of this. Super chat from Dead Planet says, Xbox's slow output of consistent first-party games this gen, in my opinion, has given Sony way too much breathing room. If they stumble, Xbox hasn't made them pay. Yeah, I don't want to harp on it too much. We know Xbox hasn't been that consistent with its first-party output. It looks like they seem to be correcting that. That's something we're going to be talking about very shortly. But yeah, no arguments from me there. Jacob Novik says, Jez, you said that Xbox don't want to be a monopoly, but funny fact, Sony want to be a monopoly. It's stated by leaks, rumors, and more. Well, if they want that monopoly, it's going to come with a frickin' price, baby.
Yeah, I think, like, I think you're right. They do want to be a monopoly, but I think that represents Jim Ryan's fundamental weakness of not looking to the future. If they do become a monopoly, they get regulated to hell, and they'll reduce how much they can make. It's not like Microsoft, right? Where it was like, okay, we've basically been sanctioned over Windows, and there's a hard limit on how much we can make with Windows now. So we need to look elsewhere to make money. So let's get into cloud. Let's, you know, double down on Office subscription service and all this kind of stuff. Windows Phone is dead. You know, we got nothing left. You know,
pour one out for Windows Phone.
Pour one out for Windows Phone. They had to diversify really hard when they got the Windows monopoly because they did get regulated to hell.
Yeah,
they had to pay
yeah.
so much in antitrust fines, both in the EU and in the US. And like, look at all the problems Google's had with regulators because of their dominance in search. You've literally got, what's his name, DeSantis, the Florida governor dude, that crazy guy.
Oh yeah, George, is that his first name?
I don't know what isn't it Robert or something? Robert DeSantis? I don't know what his name is. But he's like he's supposed to be this hyper capitalist Republican. Even he's calling to break up Google. So like, it's like when you've got a monopoly so damn big that you've got even like the hyper supposed anti-communist capitalist calling for you to be broken up. It's kind of like you've kind of got yourself into a corner now. I suppose Google, in a way, is probably like, well, kind of like happy that Bing has clawed some search.
Yeah, just a scrap, because it was like a joke, like their market share compared to Google for a long time.
Like it still is, frankly. I mean, I think it's like Bing's like, I think Bing's at like 15% now or something.
Yeah,
but they've jumped 5% in a month.
I was gonna say they were under 10 for years and years and years. So
yeah, they were tiny, and Microsoft's like, because of this whole AI stuff, all of a sudden it's like Bing's got a relevance and an opportunity to crack Google's market share dominance for the first time in a billion years.
Yeah.
So like, Google's probably like, on the one hand, they're probably like freaking out that their search dominance is going to be depleted, but on the other hand, it gives them sort of something they can argue with regulators in the EU and be like, well, yeah, okay, we've got a search dominance or whatever, but look, Microsoft's actually bringing some competition now, so please leave us alone.
Yeah, look, Microsoft's doing just fine. Okay, they're getting headlines, they're getting growing market share. Let's do it. What you want to do when you're a giant corporation like this, you want to straddle that line. If you are saying you want to be a monopoly, that's just silly. What you want to do is you want to get as close as you possibly can to being a monopoly, but not tiptoeing over. Okay, that's the line you want to straddle, baby. So if that's Sony's strategy, they need to dial it back. Take it slow it down a step or two, and say, all right, we want to be as close to a monopoly as we possibly can. Let's throw Xbox a few bones, even, so we get some heat off our back.
Well, this is the really funny thing, right? Because I think what tends to work best, at least in the medium term, is to be a duopoly. Because if you're a duopoly, you can always be like, well, you can't foreclose us because you'll be harming us against this other big player. Like, the whole Apple and Google thing. They're a duopoly in mobile, and it's worked well for them. They compete well. They compete against each other. But now Apple's really tipping the scales lately, just because it's the people have become like the standardization of Apple stuff. People's like for some reason. Whereas like Android is this fragmented ecosystem where every phone is completely different. And like if you buy like a $200 Android phone, you blame Android. You don't blame the fact that you spent $200 on a phone.
Android sucks, dude.
Android sucks because I spent $200.
Where's my phone so slow?
Yeah, exactly. It's Android's fault. But it's worked well for them, to be a duopoly, because regulators have just been like, yeah, well, they're competing against each other. 30% cut, whatever. But if they were a monopoly, there's no way they would allow Apple to have a 30% cut while also making ridiculous amounts of money on hardware, because Microsoft or Google would just be like, well, they shouldn't be a closed platform because they're a monopoly. They should open up their platform so we can put our own stores on their platform, much like Windows. Like, Windows is the regulatory benchmark for an operating system when it's a monopoly. So like if Apple had a monopoly, they would be forced to open it up like Windows. So like similarly with PlayStation, if PlayStation had a platform monopoly, they would be forced to open it up to an Xbox App Store or xCloud services and stuff like that. Sony surely wouldn't want that,
No.
But I suppose what Sony's ideal scenario is probably like it'd be Nintendo and Sony duopoly, where like Sony focuses on the high end, Nintendo focuses on handhelds, and then people have both. And then they offset any regulatory concerns between each other because they're both competing against each other. That's probably like the ideal scenario Sony would want to be in. The problem with that is that Sony's just argued in court that Nintendo is irrelevant and doesn't compete with them.
Oh no, it's all falling apart, Jez. Everything that they've been working towards, it's crumbling. But yeah, again, they're going to be fine on the other side of this. They just, again, they're trying to assure their position. A couple super chats from Hargeet Chani, who's we're on the same page here. Which Japanese pub is having financial issues, wants to be acquired, has the largest mobile presence for a Japanese publisher, and needs a change? Square. Yeah, Square, again, I don't even need Square to be an exclusive. Like, again, for me, I've talked about this. I don't care about exclusivity. I understand for a marketing purposes and, you know, brand awareness, it carries weight. But when it comes to just raw money-making potential, I'm not that interested in exclusives. So if Xbox buys Square, keeps it multi-platform, that's just a win-win for everyone. All the Xbox players who are tired of Square games skipping Xbox, they get them. And PlayStation people who have bought Square games historically on the platform don't have to worry about it. Boom, let's go. Hargi Chani, another interesting question will be around Sony acquiring anyone. Should they be allowed to? Should they have to fall to a certain market share first? Let me tell you, if immediately after this, Sony wants to try to buy a big publisher, prepare for an epic legal battle. A battle of epic proportions, because Microsoft's lawyers are going to be annoying as hell. As we've seen with PlayStation on the other side of things, if your competition is being a nuisance, getting in the way of you getting business done, you are going to bet that Microsoft is going to be loud and say, whoa, 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 wait a tick. Didn't we just go through this entire saga over again? Let me lay this all out. So it's going to be annoying. It's going to be long. I could see them acquiring someone. I don't know who. There is a chance. We are in the age where consolidation is a thing. Consolidation brings some level of comfort. Consolidation, you know, appeases investors in a lot of ways, which is sadly why a lot of these decisions are made. So I could see it. Jez, what do you think about PlayStation trying to go after a big publisher on the other side of this?
I think they should. You know, I think they should, and I think they'd be allowed to. Honestly, what I've said on the Xbox too, I want to see Square Enix attached to a platform, because I think Square Enix is being run into the ground by a terrible management layer. And Square Enix has a lot of great games that I really love, like Final Fantasy and stuff like that. I don't care if they'd make all the games exclusive to PlayStation. Let them do it. I think Square Enix would be better as part of a platform, whether it's Nintendo, Sony, or Xbox, because the shareholder culture will allow them to be better. You know?
Yeah, support the team, support the games, because Square right now they're cranking out as many games as they can because they're trying to keep money coming in to pay for the next game, and that's the trap and the cycle some of these publishers get in, is you have to put out the game in a certain time frame because you need the money for the next project, and it becomes this vicious cycle of games don't reach their potential because of this. Because of these investors on the outskirts saying, I want my money back and I want it right now. And you're like, well, shit, our game isn't ready. And they say, okay, well, get it ready enough. All right, I need it. And so that's why a lot of games take a quality hit.
Yep.
All right, just let's do something fun. Something a little different here. Let's have a little fun. We're going to pick 5 Xbox mascots. Let's say, hypothetically, this deal goes through. Xbox owns ABK. Who are the 5 mascots for Xbox now, considering who they own with Bethesda, considering they might own ABK, considering, you know, first-party stuff, Halo, obviously? We're going to hash out the 5 mascots, me, you, and the people watching. So if you're watching in the chat, you have strong opinions, drop them in there. Number 1, who is the first undisputed mascot of the Xbox brand?
Oh, man. I mean, my brain answered the question for me. So like whenever I get asked questions, right, I sort of like I try to think about what did my brain think of first, because that's the most honest answer, right?
Yeah, go with your gut.
Thinking.
Your gut and your brain.
It's Master Chief.
Master Chief. I agree. 100%.
That was
instantly the first thing that I thought of as well. Number 2, we got Master Chief, unquestionably number 1. Now, outside of that, I think it gets a little more ethereal. It gets a little more like you got to go into your thoughts, into your own opinions a bit. Who's number 2?
Doom Guy was again what my brain went to. Even though he's not really fully associated with the brand yet, I think over time he will come to be.
We're gonna keep spitballing and we're gonna whittle it down to 5. So outside of that, we got Master Chief, we got Doom Guy. I'm gonna put Senua has been a big face for Xbox now. Senua of the Hellblade series. Number 3. Number 4. Who else? Who else is Xbox looking at?
Is this based on ABK going through or not?
Yes, we're going to factor in ABK going through. We're going to obviously consider Bethesda as well. So hypothetically, this is on the other side of the ABK deal.
That's really interesting. So yeah, I'm having to think about it now because again, my brain thought of Thrall from Warcraft, but I kind of feel like that is just my brain thinking that.
I'll put it.
Like
I said, we're gonna just spitball and we're gonna whittle it down to 5. So Thrall
from Warcraft. THRALL.
Okay, Thrall number 5.
Green Jesus, as he's known.
I think Pip Boy, Vault Boy. That's a good one. Vault Boy. What about Tracer? You think Tracer's a fair Overwatch rep? Got that brand weight or no?
Nah, I don't think so. I think they've de-emphasized Tracer a little bit recently.
What about Crash Bandicoot?
I think they didn't. Yeah, Crash maybe.
Crash.
Man, Crash is so associated with PlayStation. That's really funny when you
Crash
think about
Bandicoot. Steve from Minecraft, I think, is an essential pick. Steve.
Yeah, Steve has to be in there. He's literally
Minecraft.
He's literally in Smash Brothers. So
yeah, he's. Speaking of Smash Brothers, what about Banjo? Do we consider Banjo? I know Xbox hasn't shown him a lot of love, but no.
No, Banjo.
No, sorry, no Banjo. I see a lot of people in the chat saying Banjo. Are you riling people up?
They're all wrong. They're all wrong, man. Banjo sucks. No one cares about Banjo.
Until we get a new Banjo remake, he's not on the list. Sorry. Until a remake is announced, he's not on here.
Banjo's it's literally a dead game. So
you're hurting people. You're hurting people. What about Ori? Xbox owns Ori. They've kind of severed ties with Moon because of some drama, but no Ori. They've used Ori in the past.
I don't think Ori because the franchise is dead.
What about a pirate? Just a pirate from Sea of Thieves. I won't name a name, but do we think Sea of just no pirate from Sea of Thieves?
This is the problem. It's like, yeah, what pirate? You can't just have one random ass pirate.
Why not?
I don't know. It's just not. It's not a character, man. It's just a random ass character. Like Sea of Thieves is definitely one of Xbox's biggest, most important franchises. But it's kind of like, it's like, okay, do you put a car in there for Forza? What car do you
Let's put the Ford Bronco. I'm putting Ford Bronco on the list. The 2023 Ford Bronco is on the list. 2023 Ford Bronco is on the list.
Yeah. Vault Boy definitely needs to be one, and
we need a Gears rep. Okay, I was gonna say I'm gonna be a little upset if we don't have a Gears rep. Let's do one more for good measure. 10. What do you got for 10? Anyone? Why is this one on?
It's got to be someone from Diablo. Probably like
Deckard Cain?
Tyrael, man. Nah. Deckard Cain.
Let's just use Diablo. Let's just put a big demon on the Xbox branding, dude. Come on.
Yeah, okay.
Diablo.
I was going to say Tyrael.
Okay.
Maybe it could be like Tyrael versus Diablo as a background. I don't know.
Okay, well, now we need to whittle it down to 5. Only 5 can exist here, Jez. Who's going first? Who's the one?
Master Chief.
Master Chief is staying, correct?
Has to be Master Chief. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So who's going? Who's the first one that your gut is saying goodbye? 2023 Ford Bronco, or is that staying?
Yeah, the Ford Bronco. I don't know, actually. I think you kind of do need a car there.
Okay, let's leave. You know what? I think the car might be in the top 5. Forza Horizon may be Xbox's biggest game.
Yeah, I think you have to have a car there. You have to have Forza representation there somehow.
Yeah, Ford Bronco, baby. All right,
why the Ford Bronco though, man?
Because that was the Forza car. That was the cover car for Forza Horizon 5.
Oh, was it really? I thought
a Ford Bronco, dude. Come on.
The blue car they had for Forza 4. They showed it. They
showed it on stage. Yeah. I don't remember.
I was so sick, man. Almost
made
me want to get into racing, but
I think Thrall can go. Are you gonna be offended if I delete Thrall?
Nah, I think Thrall. Yeah. I mean, even Thrall's a stretch within the Warcraft community. I would say. Everyone, a lot of people might just say Sylvanas as Warcraft rep. I don't know.
Okay, so of these, I'm torn. I think only either Crash or Steve makes the cut, and I think it's probably Steve, personally.
Oh yeah, definitely Steve over Crash.
Crash, love you. Don't get it. Don't get it twisted. Love me some Crash, but you're gone. Goodbye. All right. Marcus Phoenix and Diablo. Marcus has been the poster child for Xbox for a while. Did they retire him? He's the old guard? It's time for the new Senua takes Marcus's place, or what?
I think we have to retire Marcus, man.
Ah, Jez.
I think we do. I mean, he's not even the main protagonist of the current games.
What hurts the most is I know you're right. Deep down, I know you're right. Yeah. That's what hurts the most. Marcus, I love you. Okay. We got 7 left, so 2 got to go. So I think we've solidified that 1, 2, and 3, or sorry, 1 and 2, or sorry, 1, 2 will be Steve from Minecraft. 3 is going to be Ford Bronco, aka Forza. Who's 4? Senua? Are we locking in Senua in the top 5?
Yeah, I think we need Senua.
Senua. Who's number 5? Who is the Vault Boy?
Vault Boy is just absolutely iconic, and they're gonna bring that. They've got to bring that shit back at some point, man. It's shocking to me that they haven't got a plan for Fallout yet.
I know. I hope one day we get it, but I mean, I think this is a solid 5. You slap these on some T-shirts, that's a strong offering right there. We got Master Chief, Steve from Minecraft, Ford Bronco, Senua, and Vault Boy as the 5 official mascots of Xbox. That's a strong list, brother. That's a strong list. All right, Jez. Last, final topic of the show today. It's a little bit of I guess a bigger one in the grand scheme of things. We're going to be talking about the state of Xbox in 2023. So we're all on Twitter, probably way too much. We're all on social media. We know how, certain narratives get twisted. We know how conversations go regarding Xbox's past, Xbox's present, and Xbox's immediate future. But I kind of want to have a broader conversation about the state of Xbox in 2023. The things they're doing well right now, the things we're expecting to see right around the corner in June, and what the rest of the year and the near future for Xbox might look like. So we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly here. We're really going to dissect what Xbox is. And again, this is an Xbox podcast, so I expect everyone here to appreciate the good and the bad, because it's not going to be all positive, but there is a lot to commend, and there is some stuff to question. So let's start. In what areas is Xbox leading the industry, Jez? Big question for you to get started.
Clearly cloud. I mean, the cloud, xCloud is just so good in Germany right now. I don't know what it's like in America, because America's internet infrastructure is like mixed, shall we say. I know a lot, like there's a lot of regions that still have these hardcore data caps, because while the FTC is investigating Call of Duty, they're allowing for these big broadband monopolies to just nickel and dime consumers while offering a really crappy service. So like, I know that cloud is a mixed bag in America, which is like, when I talk about how good it is, like people are like, what are you talking about? It sucks for me. Well, it's like, yeah, well, I live in Europe where we've got, first world internet, So for me, it's great. And I was playing because we were talking about Jedi Survivor coming out soon, and I was like, man, I really need to finish Jedi Fallen Order before I play that. So like, I fired it up on my nice Razer Edge, which Razer sent me to check out, and I'm gonna write about next week probably. And I fired it up on my phone because I was wondering, like, can xCloud suitably handle what is essentially like a soft Souls-like, with pretty hardcore combat and pretty tight parry timings. I'm not playing it on hard or anything, but it's still pretty tight when you have to parry some of the mobs.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's flawless. 60 frames per second, no lag, no artifacts. It's just flawless. So, I think Microsoft's really leading the industry there. And while I think Nvidia beats them on latency, the usability of xCloud just throws Nvidia out the window. Like Nvidia GeForce Now is just nowhere near as usable as xCloud. So
yeah, you have to be like, you don't have to be a PC expert to use it, but you have to have a better understanding of PC as it is. Whereas Xbox on the cloud front is really trying to bring it to everyone. People who don't have a PC at home, they just have a TV even. They can just understand how it works. Pick a game. It has a nice flashy UI that's easy to understand with big pictures of games. Go in there, select what you want to play it. Another huge avenue that Xbox is leading the industry is the subscription service. Xbox Game Pass, a disruptive force in the industry, completely changed how we engage with video games online. We've seen it in the film industry, we've seen it in the music industry, these subscription services, this access to content. But up until Xbox Game Pass, we hadn't seen that translated to the gaming space. And Xbox has done an amazing job curating that, changing people's habits, and pushing this forward in a way that benefits the player and it benefits the games that they can create. So PlayStation and Nintendo have both followed suit in some way, shape, or form, but I don't think either one of them is on the same level as Xbox in terms of, their biggest games first party day and date as the selling point for, we want people to play our games. Like, obviously they want people to buy them, but more than anything, they want people to play their games. And when you're a developer, especially a first party developer in Xbox, that's got to be comforting because you don't have to worry about X sales milestones. You need to sell X games or this shit is not breaking even, and that's a bad place to be. Now it's like, hey, make the best game you can, and then people are going to buy it on PC and they're going to play it on Game Pass, and maybe they'll even sign up for Game Pass on PC. So I think Xbox Game Pass is one of the pillars and one of the biggest points of innovation from Xbox and just of the entire industry of the last several years.
Yep.
Jez, what's your biggest complaint about Xbox right now?
My biggest complaint about Xbox is the way the ABK deal is it feels like it's all encompassing, and it kind of feels like they are distracted. Like, it feels like the Xbox dashboard hasn't had meaningful updates for what feels like a million years. We got the game DVR still awful. After I put out this massive survey over a year ago saying that the number one thing people want to see fixed are achievements, or the top things people want to see fixed rather are achievements, the game DVR, and the dashboard.
Yep.
And none of it has been addressed. None of it. And I think that's because they're distracted by other things. Like, I know a lot of the dev hours are going into being poured into xCloud, which is really important. But I kind of feel like you're a big company, you should be able to afford to do both. And I kind of feel like the Xbox console experience is degraded because of the absolute massive focus and emphasis they are putting on xCloud, which, is obviously it's important and they need to do it. But at the same time, it's like, this is your bread and butter. We consumers of the Xbox platform, we built this platform, with you guys, and you're basically ignoring us at the moment. So that's probably my biggest complaint right now, is that how the Xbox dashboard has become second fiddle to xCloud, Game Pass, and all that other stuff. I feel like they should be able to do both, and that is one area where I'd like to see them improve.
I agree. I think we've seen that Xbox is maybe trying to do too many things at the same time. And that's why I guess I still have questions about the ABK acquisition, because we've seen it time and time again with other, companies buying up properties and buying up teams. You have to be able to manage all of that successfully, and managing all of that successfully is a huge investment. So we know they're investing in cloud. We know they're investing in acquiring new teams. We know they're investing in partnerships. We know they have a lot of energy on the ABK deal. So I agree. And especially in the last year, it's just felt chaotic on the Xbox front. There's like all of these things that they're making small progress on in some way, shape, or form. And then other core elements of the Xbox experience are just not getting refreshed or updated in any way, where Nintendo and PlayStation are both, bringing new features, bringing meaningful upgrades to what the actual core console ecosystem is. And sure, maybe they're looking at the metrics and saying right now, the console, until we have a more compelling library of first-party games and more compelling subscription service, we just have to put the console experience on the back burner in terms of how that operates. And if you're a primary console player, you feel it. You feel it in a lot of ways. So I totally agree there. And I guess my biggest complaint is just kind of consistency across the board. when it comes to messaging, when it comes to output, when it comes to how they interact and engage. They have been very transparent, which I think is refreshing in a lot of ways. But they've also set expectations that just end up frustrating people. And sometimes
Yeah,
less
they're
less is
terrible at
more
setting
in
expectations.
terms of communication. As much as people get frustrated with not knowing what's coming, Xbox has gotten themselves in the opposite camp where they say too much and don't deliver on that. And then there's quotes being taken out of context years later. Phil Spencer talking about VR still to this day gets brought up, and that is a big question. Why would you say that? Why would you come out and say that that was a thing and then have it not come to fruition? It seems a little bit strange. So Xbox, generally speaking, needs to be more consistent with its messaging. And if that means less messaging, then maybe that's the right approach.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that they've done in the past, which they've stopped doing now, to be fair, but one of the things that they've done in the past, which always really bugged me, was they'd have a AAA marketing budget for like a AA or less game. Like they put out when they announced Recall, for example, they put out this massive, super cool CGI trailer that really made the game look like it was going to be a AAA, and then it's $30, and then it's a AA game at best, and it's like you keep doing this. You did this with Crackdown. You did this with Phantom Dust that got cancelled. You did this with
Oh,
Scalebound that got cancelled.
State of Decay 2, another prime example of a game that had a lot of marketing dollars and was,
Yeah,
it's
and
still an indie
double
game.
A,
Yeah.
double A. And now like I feel like I can't trust their CGI trailers. So like when they put out the amazing trailer for State of Decay 3 with the zombie deer and
Yes.
the lass, with the bow and arrow, looked really cool, really cool. It's like, yeah, okay, now is the game going to look like that, or is it going to look like a game from the 360 gen again? So don't
Uh,
overmarket and overpromise. It's one thing they do time and time again. And they say, "Oh, all these games are coming in the next 12 months." You overpromised again. You overpromised. Why do you keep doing this? Overpromise and underdeliver is the absolute antithesis of marketing, and that's what Microsoft keeps doing. They overpromise and then underdeliver. They need to stop doing that.
yeah, I don't disagree there. They've done it time and time again. And like for me, like I understand that marketing needs to be bold, it needs to be sexy, it needs to get people excited. And sometimes that's at a disconnect with what the product is or what the timeline looks like. You got to juggle that. You got to balance the reality of a game shipping and being developed and be getting people excited about it, because you still need people to be excited about a game. And I think
Yeah.
they do a good job of that. Like we've all been excited for games, but then on the other side of it, like you said, they need to make sure that the quality of the final product matches the excitement of the launch.
Yeah, I think they're just, in one way, it's probably partially because they haven't had great products to work with. And part of that is a legacy of being underfunded, going back to Terry Myerson days, where they'll be like, okay, this is your budget for global publishing, and it's like, well, we can only afford to make indie games with this. And they're like, well, deal with it. By the way, here's your budget for marketing, and it's like way higher than what you'd need to market an indie game potentially.
Yeah,
But it's catch-22 ultimately. But things are better now, and hopefully moving in the right direction, and we
yeah.
can get to a point where I can trust them again.
Britt in the chat brings up an interesting point. It says, I disagree. Their show this year was under promise and over deliver. How can you forget about that one already? We haven't. The message here is consistency. That one show, if they can give
Yeah,
me another show
consistency.
that's that, I thought that last developer direct was fantastic. An exceptional way to message your games when they're coming. Not promising a release date for Forza, saying, here's Forza, it's coming this year. We don't know exactly when. Sorry. Like that, as much as people are mad about that, I appreciate that honesty and that cadence. And then giving dates where they could, and then doing the shadow drop of Hi-Fi Rush, having that big surprise. Do that. That if they can do that two times a year, with maybe a big showcase in June, let's go. That is enough. That is more than enough.
Yeah.
With that being said, people were asking this earlier in Super Chat, so I want to circle back to this. What are you expecting from Xbox at their June showcase this year? We know, or I shouldn't say we know, it seems like they're changing the messaging from the Xbox and Bethesda showcase to just the Xbox Game Showcase. According to a tweet, do you think they're really trying to bring everyone together closer into this family atmosphere? Or do you think the reason they had Bethesda the last few years is because Bethesda was doing most of the heavy lifting?
I think that's pretty much it. Bethesda was doing most of the heavy lifting, and that's why it ended up being, portrayed that way. Um, it is what it is. I think every year it's going to be different, based on which studios are doing what.
Hmm.
You have to remember when it comes to Bethesda, they are regarded again, like Mojang, as a limited integration subsidiary, which means they still have their own marketing teams, they still
Yep.
have their own PR teams that are completely separate. They still do things their own way. And yeah, Microsoft will come in and say, okay, this is on Game Pass, we want this tech used here, whatever. Microsoft will do Microsoft things. But by and large, it is literally just Bethesda as it always was, just now also on Game Pass and xCloud.
Yep.
So so I suppose when it comes to marketing cycles, if there are years where Bethesda has tons of stuff to show, but Xbox doesn't have jack shit to show, then yeah, they'll do it that way, where it's like Xbox and Bethesda show, where it's like Bethesda does a lot of the heavy lifting. But then this year might have cycled back in the other direction. Maybe this year, like Redfall will already be out, and maybe like some of the other Bethesda stuff, like whatever Machine Games is working on and stuff like that. Maybe that's still further out, so the only thing they've really got to show is Starfield, maybe, and maybe they'd just be like, "Well, we'll keep, Wolfenstein 3 or the next Doom game or whatever, or Quake or whatever they're working on. We'll keep all that under wraps for QuakeCon or something like that." Because don't forget they've got their own events as well, and also Gamescom, and potentially if this ABK thing goes through, they're gonna have so much content that they need to spread around all the different studios
Oh
and
yeah.
all the different events. You got BlizzCon, you got QuakeCon, you got Minecraft Live or whatever they call it these days, and then like you potentially got XO coming back probably. Um, but a lot of these studios as well, a lot of these publishers like Mojang and Bethesda, they all really, really value their sense of independence, and a lot of them probably don't even want to be seen as being under Xbox. And I think we saw that reflected in what could be interpreted as a sort of frustrated comment from Arcane, where it's like, yeah, there was change with the capital C.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hard to read that in a positive light, um, frankly.
And
So it's
I know
kind of
people
like,
just fundamentally don't like change. All of us are guilty of that. So maybe it's not that
well,
the
yeah.
change was inherently bad. It's just that there was big change and there was sudden big change, and that kind of maybe disrupted the flow of things a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So,
But of
but
the
in any case,
yeah, I was gonna say, of the big first party games that we know about from Xbox, because I think that's the biggest question mark for a lot of fans and a lot of people who look at the Xbox or look at the future of Xbox is we know a lot of games are coming, we just don't really know when. Do you think we're going to see updates to any of the previously announced stuff like our State of Decay 3s, our Avoweds, any titles like that this year in June? Or do you think that's still a little bit off?
it's super hard to say. Like
It is a
I'm
big question
pretty.
mark. It's hard to say.
I think Hellblade is a lock in. So like you can bet on Hellblade being there. I mean, the fact that they're showcasing it so much, I wouldn't be surprised at this point if Hellblade just straight up launches later this year. Obviously, Forza Motorsport's going to be a big footprint there as well. But like, I'm so like, in previous years, I kind of had a good idea of where a lot of the studios were at. And Microsoft's done a pretty good job of locking down a lot of ways that things used to leak from Microsoft. A lot of that stuff's been closed down and tightened up and improved over the last few years.
They got
So
their
honestly,
flex
I'm like,
tape. They've closed up a lot of the leaks, huh?
yeah, they got a flex tape. So, it's I'm like in the dark in a way that at least right now, things might come out at the last minute like they did with the developer direct, where it's like, oh, I got
All of a
developer
sudden,
direct
like,
like
oh damn, getting DMs like, oh, this is
yeah,
happening.
3 days, yeah, 3 days before the fact. Um, so that might happen again, but like I'm like in the dark in a way that I haven't been through it quite a long time. So, um, a lot of all of this beyond is just speculation. Like, I'd like to see State of Decay. I'd like to see Contraband. I'd like to see all this stuff revealed and detailed, but honestly, just don't know where any of this stuff is right now.
And I gotta say, it's kind of exciting, honestly, to be a little bit in the dark with what Xbox is
Yeah,
working on and how they're gonna message it. Because we do know a lot is coming. We do know teams are working on projects that haven't been officially revealed. Some of those we don't know how long they've been in development, what the timeline looks like. I am part of the Hellblade 2023 camp. I think there is a potential for it to launch this holiday or maybe Q1 of 2024, depending on how we get the release date. If they show gameplay in June, for example, I think we could potentially get a date. And if they don't, maybe they'll save that for later in the year for a developer direct, and we'll get that Q1 release date. But I do think, based on how much we've seen of Hellblade and how much they've messaged Hellblade, that release date cannot be that far away in the grand scheme of things. Other ones like Fable, I don't know. I really don't. Fable, Everwild, I really can't say like where those are at, like what those are looking
I wouldn't be
like.
surprised if Fable's still further out.
They
To
still
be
keep
honest,
hiring for like major roles for the project, which indicates that it is further out.
yeah, I would think so. I
Um,
think I think they really want to make something big and special with Hellblade, which is not Hellblade with Fable, which has probably involved scaling the team up in a way they hadn't expect. Because the kinds of people they're hiring are like CD Projekt Red alumni, Rockstar alumni,
yep.
like people who've worked on these mega games that take like years and years and years and years to make, like Red Dead Redemption and Grand Theft Auto and stuff like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if like Fable just ends up being this sort of like where is it? Where is it for years and years and years? And then one day they're just like, okay, here it is. And it's like something a little bit beyond what we typically expect Microsoft to be capable of. But that's
That's what
just pure speculation. It could go the complete opposite direction and just be bad.
I'm hoping that they are really looking at what, like, the landscape of stuff like The Witcher 3, of Elden Ring, and they say, all right, like, we are going to enter this space with our premier open world RPG franchise. Like, this is our premier franchise in that space. This is a premier first party Xbox franchise, a legacy franchise. How do we bring it back in a way that sells the fans of Witcher 3, that sells fans of Elden Ring? And, you know, for me, and I've talked about this, and a lot of people have said, I think Xbox is held to a quote unfair standard, XYZ. Why do we expect so much more from Xbox? Xbox right now is in third place and trying to be in first place. So, unfortunately for them, if they want to close that market share, their games need to be better than as good as the competition. Their games need to be better than the competition. And based on all the investments into these teams in these studios, there is potential for that to be a reality. And that's what gets me so excited about the future of Xbox Game Studios, is the genuine promise and possibility of what these teams can do.
Yeah.
So, Jez, final question on the state of 2023, or state of Xbox in 2023 topic. What are the Xbox proper or games or teams you are most excited about?
I mean, I was like moaning about State of Decay earlier, but even though State of Decay wasn't like the big AAA zombie game I was hoping for, it was still fun as hell, and it was
Mm-hmm.
still like
Yep.
exactly the kind of game I want to play. I want to play a cozy, build my zombie base, and then defend it from hordes of the undead. That's my kind of game. I've been dreaming about that since State of Decay 1 launched, and it was janky as hell, and I was like, this would be amazing if it had a budget behind it. And yeah, I'm waiting for that reality. So even though I was like saying I was disappointed a bit in State of Decay 2 with the tethering and the jank and stuff like that, I'm still probably the game I'm most intrigued about. But also the Coalition. I feel like Coalition's been very quiet recently, and I
Yeah,
kind
they
of feel
really
like
have.
maybe they're pushing to get to the next level. All we've seen from the Coalition is like a pretty impressive Matrix Unreal Engine 3 tech demo. So it's like, a lot of the people who are at the coalition are former Unreal Engine employees. They work very closely with Epic, and they are like at the cutting edge of what you know is possible with the Unreal Engine. They have been for years and years and years, and that's kind of like it's almost like part of their identity is that they are the masters of the Unreal Engine. They help other
They are.
studios learn the Unreal. Yeah.
Like, when you saw
So
Gears 4, was it Gears 4? Or no, Gears 5 running on like the base Xbox One and looking as good as it did and running as well as it did. Like,
yeah, it's
that's
absurd.
proof that they know the ins and outs of Unreal like anyone like unlike
Yeah.
anyone else.
I mean, even Gears 3 on the Xbox 360 was like above and beyond anything else out there, at the time. A lot of people don't remember that. Like Gears 3 was just like
That
it didn't have the same kind of footprint as Gears 1 or 2 did in terms of mindshare, but my god, that game was stunning and had such impressive visual effects. There's a scene where like Marcus is dreaming and they really go crazy with like all these sort of intricate animations and stuff like that. It's a really impressive game. But yeah, I would love to see what the coalition's working on. But again, maybe it's too early. Maybe they're pushing to the next level and that means, more time taken to get to that place. Because what they had been doing for years and years and years was basically just making Gears, same Gears game over and over again. Tried some new things with Gears, the new Gears, but again, it was still Gears at the end of the day.
Do you
You know,
remember
so
when
I
Gears first came out? Do you remember the marketing lead up to that and the moment it released and looking at that game on an Xbox 360 and going, "Holy shit, I've never seen anything like it. How did they get a game to look like this?" Like
I
that's
can't
that's the
I
kind of
can't
moment I
even
want
remember.
from the next Coalition game. Like I want that moment for them to like they've iterated on Gears. Like Gears 5 looked amazing. Gears 5 Hivebusters looked absolutely incredible on Series X.
Yeah.
But now that we're transitioning to Unreal 5, I think there is like this cool potential for a lot of teams to really get in the weeds and learn these engines and then come out with something that is unlike anything they've been able to do in the past. And I think Hellblade 2 could be an example of that. What's next from the Coalition could be an example of that. And another one that I'm really excited about is Everwild because Rare, as I've talked about, with Sea of Thieves, that is one of the most important IP for Xbox of the last decade, but that is also one of the most innovative and exciting IP in gaming for a long time. Because in this day and age, it is so rare and so hard to create new ideas, new gameplay mechanics, new gameplay loops. Everyone's chasing the same trends, everyone wants to do the same thing. So to have ideas that are genuinely unlike anything that exists in a game is so hard. We've had decades and decades of video games. New ideas are tough. And sure, you could look at it and say, well, it's just a pirate open world game. But there were so many mechanics and gameplay systems in that were never in any other video games. And I think Everwild has a chance to do that as well and kind of deliver an experience that is very unique, very isolated. And I hope that team is getting the time and taking the time to make sure that loop is right. Because if what we heard about they're trying to maybe not do combat or do combat in a way that's different from other games, like that's going to be tough because generally we look at a video game and say combat is fun. That's the fun part. I want that. And so if you're trying to do a game that doesn't have that, there are examples, your Animal Crossings of the world, but what does that look like in an open world RPG maybe? So that is the game that I just cannot wait to actually see what the gameplay looks like. And given Rare's recent track record of creativity, I'm really excited to see what the grand reveal ends up being.
Yeah. It's there's just so much the takeaway from this discussion really is there's just so much to look forward to potentially,
Yeah.
but
It's exciting.
yeah.
It's genuine. Like you look at the future of Xbox, you look at the future of the games industry, and there's a lot to be excited about. And so, Xbox has done a lot and is doing a lot to improve the platform, improve their perception, and deliver great games. And for us, as people who want to play great games, like hell yeah, let's go. That is an exciting place to be. And I think as much as we are tired of the waiting game, and a lot of Xbox fans are, I am optimistic that it will pay off this time around. And I know some people aren't. And based on Xbox's history, that's fine. That's a fine place to be. Not going to fault you for it, but I want to keep the dream alive that they're going to hit, Jez. Are you with me? Are they going to hit, or is it going to be just a lengthy fumble on the other side of all of this?
Nah, I think we are moving towards a golden age for Xbox. I mean, it's been slow, it's been gradual, and I think one of the things that Microsoft has done and put a lot of emphasis on is developer health. You know,
Yeah.
reducing that sense of crunch, reducing that pressure on the devs, and all that kind of stuff. Which I think is probably a factor in why things feel like they've taken longer, is because Microsoft's trying to change the industry to make it a little bit healthier, at least in the West. Um, you could say the trade-off of that is that, some other countries which perhaps have a more of a quote unquote hardcore working ethic, right or wrongly, maybe
Japan.
that's why yeah, maybe that's why some other countries
From
have suddenly
software.
pulled ahead. Yeah, from software. Yeah, maybe that's why they've suddenly pulled ahead in recent years because there has been this emphasis in the West on reducing the pressure and taking breaks, rightfully so. But the trade there's a trade off there. There's an undeniable trade off that things take longer. But you'd hope that it's more sustainable. Maybe things take longer, but you won't see developers getting totally burned out. You won't see like banger, 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 and then all of a sudden the next game's like just crash and burn because everything's gone wrong and the studio's just wiped out and the human cost just isn't worth it. So there's that to consider as well. But I do think we are moving to that place, and I think the future's really bright for Xbox.
Yeah, and I'm glad that Microsoft again is making sure that they are balancing that because again, yeah, great games. We've gotten great games in the past that have come at the cost of crunch and the expense of the human tax of making a game. But then you always see people like on the other side who like put their heart and soul and like dedicate all this time and energy, and then the product's out the door, and then they're done. They're like, I'm done making games forever. And then you have a lot of talented people who just leave the industry because of what is required to make a video game. And then you have an audience on the outskirts saying, well, I don't care. Like, I don't care that this cost you this because I got a cool game. And so I'm glad that, Microsoft is at least from the outside looking in, like making sure that these people have a better balance of that. And if that means games take another year, I think, well, initially that might be a tough band-aid to pull off. If we can set that standard, I think we'll all, on the other side of it, end up being okay. And it's not like there's a shortage of games to play, generally speaking. It's not like
I
Xbox
mean,
first party is the only
yeah.
people making video games right now.
And that's the other angle to this is like, people say, "Oh man, this game's taking forever," and it's like, dude, there's not a shortage of things to play. It's good for the industry if things take longer to make because it'll give other games more time to shine. It'll mean there's more room in the calendar for other games. Like if like I was saying on Twitter, I'm so glad that Starfield is delayed because now I'll be able to
Yes!
give all of them to Diablo.
I didn't want
And if
Diablo and Starfield in the same month. That would have been so miserable. Like,
straight up, I wouldn't be playing Starfield that month. If Diablo, I'd be all over Diablo. I would not be touching Starfield because it's these are going to be huge games. I physically won't have time for both.
exactly.
And
Yeah, I joked about the March fielders when they were talking about Starfield coming out in March. I was like, if it drops near Resident Evil, it's dead to me. Okay, I'm sorry. Like you're not getting both out of me. I only have so much time and energy, and I can't have several massive games hit in the same month. I just can't. Okay. Jez, let's do community Q&A and get on out of here. We've been running a gauntlet. Appreciate all of you hanging out, tuning in. Again, appreciate all of you. This is episode 100. It's been an awesome run. You guys are all amazing. If any of you are new to the show, we're live every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. You can subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all that juicy stuff. Huge shout out to all the new channel members, all of the people dropping super chats. First question comes from Jacob Novik, who says, Jez, so owning StarCraft, ABK, and the Elder Scrolls Bethesda, and buying Square Enix is a monopoly in MMOs, then God, I hope Xbox doesn't decide to buy Square Enix. I guess not really a question, but more of a comment about that. Monkey versus Tramps. We kind of touched on this already, but Resident Evil 4 Remake, Game of the Year contender, question mark? Do you think Resident Evil 4 Remake is in the Game of the Year discussions?
I think man, it's kind of tough because it is a remake.
It is a remake.
And I think
yeah,
kind of like that will probably give some people pause to vote for it. You gotta remember the people voting for the Game of the Year awards. They're journalists at the end of the day, and sometimes they tend to think about things a little bit more differently, maybe about some of this stuff. So
when
it's kind of like
when
with the Oscars,
RE2
you have-
remake hit,
sorry, go
I thought that could be a Game of the Year contender. I thought it was that
on.
good. So
Yeah, I mean it could be, but
could be.
I think the difference fundamentally with Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4 is that Resident Evil 2 was remaking a much older game.
Yeah.
Whereas honestly, Resident Evil 4, the original, holds up. in a way.
Still very playable.
It's still very playable. So I think like that might dampen its chances a little bit, especially in a year where you got Starfield and Diablo launching. But who knows? I think it could be nominated.
Yeah.
It probably should be nominated even.
I was stoked
But
to
we'll
see
see.
Village get nominated. That game was incredible, and horror, generally speaking, doesn't get that kind of recognition in the grand space. So that was dope. A Resident Evil Remake is one of my Game of the Year picks right now. Absolutely dope. And he also asks, or they also ask, also Code Veronica Remake next? I think I know where you stand there. Is that the one you would want next? You're picking one. Is it Code Veronica?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Code,
remake?
yeah.
Dino Crisis, man. I'm gonna go. I know it's not Resident Evil, but Dino Crisis is Resident Evil like. Let's face it.
All right, Gold Shell says, okay, so I know mobile games aren't really looked at fondly by the core gamers, but hear me out. Do you think Xbox achievements would be implemented into mobile games like Mighty Doom, Candy Crush, Hearthstone, etc.? The reason I ask is that Xbox achievements are a fairly big reason I prefer to play on Xbox or the Xbox PC app. I personally would be more willing to try mobile games if they expanded my achievement count on the ecosystem I'm already invested in. When all of this potentially goes through, Jez, do you think we'll see Xbox achievies for stuff like Candy Crush, Mighty Doom, etc.?
Sorry, can you repeat that again? There's someone asking me for stuff.
Oh yeah, no problem. Do you
Sorry,
think that post ABK, Mighty Doom, Candy Crush, and other mobile games will get Xbox achievements?
Man, Mighty Doom should have got Xbox achievements already.
It should have.
You
It's a
know.
Bethesda game. They're already owned. They've been owned since it launched. What's up with that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's got Google achievements. Who cares about Google achievements?
No one cares about Google achievements. I'm sorry. Give us Xbox achievements, but I feel like, and this is going to be a hard truth, Xbox right now doesn't care about achievements. It doesn't seem like they care to improve it or invest in it in a meaningful way, because I don't know. Maybe that audience has moved on, that audience has changed, and there's maybe again metrics that show that people just don't engage or care about achievements as much anymore, so they don't care. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, achievements is just another one of them things that is on the back burner, you know.
It's just sitting there in the wings, waiting for that big free. Because for me, like at this point right now, big number, I don't really care about big number anymore. Like I have well over 100 and I think 80,000 gamer score, and I don't like when the number gets bigger. I don't feel good watching the number get bigger. Like I would like them to completely revamp what that means, and that takes work, and that takes a lot of energy that they're probably not investing in achievements right now, sadly. So
Sadly,
all
much
right,
sad.
Jez, I think we're gonna wrap this up, man. Appreciate you, dude. Again, we talked about this at the beginning, but you're fundamental to the show. You're probably the main reason this show even exists. You and I were talking about like doing something for Windows Central early on, and I was, we were running ideas back and forth, and this is kind of what we settled on. And the format has changed a little bit, but I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you do and everything you've done, and yeah. You're one of my favorite people to talk about video games with. So appreciate you joining me for the big episode 100, dude.
Man, thanks for having me, and it's been cool that you kept it going after all the stuff at Windows Central and budget cuts and all this kind of crap that went on. Because I look at Windows Central Gaming Channel, and we haven't uploaded there for ages, but I still like really fond of the stuff we built there. Back when I had budget for video.
It was a good run. We've done a lot, because I think when I started we had like 1,800 subs over there, and we were like, what do we do with this? How do we revamp it? Like we haven't done video stuff consistently. So for you and me, like to have that tag team duo of like, all right, let's just do stuff. Like what about this idea? What about this idea? And just like trying stuff, and to see people connect with it and to see that channel grow was really cool. So yeah, I'm grateful that I was able to continue doing Chaturdays, because on the other side I wasn't really sure. I was like, oh, I don't know how this is all going to play out. So maybe it was just a good run. It was a good run all last.
Yeah, but hey, maybe you'll have me back for episode 200, man.
Hey, here's to 100 more, right? I'll be 50 years old by then. I'll feel like 50 years old at least. All right. Thanks so much to everyone who tuned in. hung out. Appreciate all of you. Have an amazing week. Have an amazing weekend. And we will catch you next week. Take care, everybody.
Take care, everybody.